The boardroom door swung open, and a man in a $4,000 suit had the CEO by the throat, pressing her back against the glass, while three other men stood there and did nothing. Then a mop handle came down across his forearm and snapped it like a dry branch. The janitor didn't even raise his voice. He said, "Let her go. I asked nice the first time." Nobody in that building knew his name. Nobody had ever looked at his face. And in about 90 seconds, all of them were going to find out why a man with 16 confirmed rescues chose to push a mop for $14 an hour. Comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels, and subscribe, because it gets worse before it gets better. At 2:14 in the morning, Daniel Carter heard a woman say the word, "Don't." He heard it through a closed door on the 38th floor of Everhart Solutions, 40 feet down a hallway over the sound of his own cartwheels. Most people would have missed it. Most people would have kept walking, because at 2 in the morning on an executive floor, a raised voice is just a bad quarter and somebody's marriage falling apart on the phone. Daniel stopped the cart. He stood there with one hand still on the handle, and he counted, not seconds. Voices. One woman, 3 men. The woman was near the window. Her voice came back flat. No echo, because the glass ate it. The 3 men were spread. One at the door, one at the table, one behind her. That last one was the problem. Nobody stands behind a person they're negotiating with. Walk away, he told himself. You are a janitor. You have a daughter asleep in a 2-bedroom apartment in Ballard, and a babysitter you pay in cash, and no health insurance worth the name. Walk away. He'd been telling himself that for 11 months. Then he heard the woman say, "Take your hand off me." And Daniel Carter did something he had promised his dead wife and his living daughter and 11 flag-draped coffins that he would never ever do again. He let go of the cart, 14 hours earlier. "Dad, Dad, Dad." "I'm awake." "You're not awake, you're doing the thing where your eyes are open but your face is asleep." Daniel lifted his head off the kitchen table. Emma Carter, 9 years old, 71 pounds of pure prosecutorial energy, stood in front of him, with her backpack already on and her hair in a ponytail. She had done herself, which meant it was crooked, and she would not accept help. "Your face is asleep," he said. "Your face is asleep. It's 7:05 and you got home at 6. 6:20. That's worse, Dad." He sat up. He rubbed his hands over his face hard, the way you do when you're trying to push the tiredness back into your skull for a few more hours. "You eat." "I made toast." "You made toast for both of us." "I made toast for me." "You were asleep." "I didn't want to waste bread." That right there was the thing that got him. Not the 12-hour shifts, not the chemicals that had eaten the fingerprints off his thumbs. A 9-year-old kid doing math on a loaf of bread. "Emma." "What?" "You never have to save bread from me. Ever. You understand?" She shrugged with one shoulder. "Okay. Say it back." "I never have to save bread. Dad, we're gonna be late." He drove her the 11 blocks to school in a 2009 Corolla, with a tape deck and a heater that only worked at full blast or not at all. She talked the whole way. She always did. Daniel had learned over the last 4 years that his job in the morning was not to talk. It was to be a wall she could throw a ball against. And Mrs. Okafor said we have to do a thing about our parents' jobs. The wall stopped being a wall. A thing. Like a poster. About what our parents do. And you present it. You present it. To the class. Everybody does it. Marcus Delgado's dad flies planes, and Priya's mom is a, I don't know, she does something with laws. Daniel watched the light. Watched a woman cross with a stroller. Watched a delivery van run the yellow. "What are you going to say?" he asked. Emma was quiet for the length of a block. That was unusual enough that he glanced over. "I'm going to say you're a night custodian at a technology company," she said. Every word carefully placed like she'd been practicing it. "That's true." "Yeah." "Emma." "It's fine, Dad." "That's not what I asked." She looked out the window. 9 years old, and she already knew how to protect him. He hated that. He hated it more than the shifts, more than the bread. Kayla said her mom said janitors are people who didn't finish school, Emma said. I told her you finished school. You did finish school, right? I finished school. See? That's what I said. She unbuckled her seatbelt before the car stopped, which was a thing he'd asked her not to do 400 times. Anyway, I don't care what Kayla says. Kayla eats glue sticks. She eats glue sticks? She ate one. In 2nd grade, I remember. Okay. Bye, Dad. She was gone. Backpack bouncing, crooked ponytail. Daniel sat in the drop-off lane with his hands at 10 and 2, and behind him somebody honked, and he did not move for 4 full seconds. I told her I finished school. He'd finished BUD/S. He'd finished SERE. He'd finished a language course in Pashto and a course in maritime interdiction, and a course, God help him, on how to write a letter to a mother. He had a bronze star in a coffee can in the back of a closet under a bag of Christmas lights, and his daughter was going to stand up in front of Kayla, who ate a glue stick, and say, "My dad cleans buildings at night." He pulled out into traffic. The thing about being invisible is that it's a skill. Daniel had been trained in it. Not in a classroom, you can't teach it in a classroom, but on rooftops in cities where a 6'1" American male is not a normal thing to be. You learn to make yourself the least interesting object in the room. You learn to move at the speed of the environment. You learn that people don't see faces, they see categories. Show them a category, and their brain files you and moves on. At Everhart Solutions, the category was gray coveralls and a cart. He'd been there 11 months, and he could count on one hand the number of employees who had ever looked directly at his eyes. Carter. Make that one hand and a thumb. Marcus Webb was 58 years old, night security, 22 years Air Force before that, and the only man in the building who treated Daniel like a person instead of an appliance. He had a bad knee, a worse ex-wife, and an opinion on everything. Marcus? You look like death warmed over and served cold. Thank you. You sleeping? Sure. Uh-huh. Marcus buzzed him through the turnstile without looking at the screen. Hey, you hear about 36? What about it? Whole floor's badge restricted now. Overnight. Used to be I could walk it on rounds. Now my card don't open it. Daniel had already known that. He'd known it for 6 days because on Tuesday his master key had stopped working on the 36th floor stairwell door and nobody had told him. Huh, he said. That's it, huh? Marcus leaned on the desk. 22 years I did this in the service, and I'm telling you, when they start carving up a building's access, somebody upstairs is scared of somebody else upstairs. Or they're doing an audit. An audit. Marcus said the word like it had personally insulted him. Daniel, my man, in the middle of the night, with private contractors carrying their own hardware. Daniel's hand paused on the cart handle for about a quarter of a second. Contractors, he said. 4 of them, Sunday. Came in at 11, out at 4. Vaughn signed them in himself. Richard Vaughn signed in a night crew. Executive Vice President of Operations walking down to my desk at 11 at night with a clipboard. You believe that? Marcus laughed. Man's never said good evening to me in 6 years. Sunday he asks about my knee. Daniel looked at the elevator bank, then at the ceiling camera in the northwest corner, which had been rotated 8 degrees to the left sometime in the last 2 weeks, so that its cone no longer covered the freight elevator door. 8 degrees. Just enough. Not enough for anybody to notice. Well, Daniel said, people are nice sometimes. People are never nice for free, brother. Marcus waved him off. Go clean something. He worked the floors in order. 31, 32, 33. Trash glass restrooms vacuum, move on. 240 minutes of work he could do in 180, which left him 60 minutes a night that nobody had ever accounted for. He didn't waste them. On 33, he emptied a shredder bin and noticed it was full of documents that had been fed in the wrong direction. Long strips instead of confetti. which meant somebody had been in a hurry. On 34, he found a conference room where 4 chairs had been pulled to one end of a 12-person table, and 1 chair pulled around to the opposite side alone. That's not a meeting, that's an interview. Or an interrogation. On 35, he found a phone charger left in an outlet under the credenza. Not a normal charger. It had a second port on the underside, and it was warm. He crouched and looked at it for a long moment. Not your problem. He stood up. He left it. He kept cleaning. That was the deal he'd made with himself. He could see. He couldn't unsee. You don't get to turn that off. It's not a switch. It's a way your brain assembles the world after 11 years of it, but seeing wasn't doing. Seeing was free. Doing was what cost. Doing was what put a folded flag in a woman's arms. He'd stood in 11 living rooms. He'd said the words 11 times, on behalf of a grateful nation. And in the 9th living room, a woman named Denise Ramirez had looked up at him with her son on her hip and said very quietly, "Was it worth it, Danny?" And he hadn't had an answer. Sarah had been alive then. Sarah had been alive for 8 more months. Then a drunk kid in a pickup on I-5 had taken care of that, and Daniel Carter had come home from a war to find that the war wasn't the thing that took people from him. Emma had been 5. She didn't remember her mother's voice. She'd asked him once at 7 if he had a recording. He didn't. 12 years of marriage, and he did not have 30 seconds of Sarah's voice, because who records their wife saying the milk's gone bad? So no. Daniel Carter did not do things anymore. Daniel Carter saw things and pushed a cart. He was on 37 at 11:40 when he heard Richard Vaughn. He heard him before he saw him a particular kind of voice, the kind that's never once had to wonder if it's being listened to. Don't care what the board thinks. The board is 9 men who think a spreadsheet is a personality. The board will think what I tell them to think by Thursday. Daniel took his cart into the alcove by the copy room, not hiding, just being where the eye slides off. Vaughn came around the corner with his phone against his ear and a second man behind him. Daniel clocked the second man in half a second, mid-40s gray polo no lanyard, and a walk that started from the hips. Cop walk, or contractor walk, and he was carrying his weight on his back foot, which meant he'd been trained to expect trouble from any direction. Vaughn didn't look at Daniel. Vaughn had never once looked at Daniel. The problem isn't the audit, Vaughn was saying. The problem is, she found the audit. Her father built the company on trust, and she inherited the same disease. He stopped talking. Daniel felt rather than saw the second man's head turn toward him. Daniel kept mopping. Same speed. Same slow arc. He hummed 4 notes of nothing. "Him," the man said. "That's the cleaner," Vaughn said with the exact tone a man uses for a piece of furniture in the way. "He doesn't speak English." Daniel mopped. They walked on. And there it was, the thing he'd been keeping at arm's length for 6 weeks, snapping into place with a click he could almost hear. Her father built the company on trust, and she inherited the same disease. She found the audit. Daniel finished the hallway. He wrung the mop. He emptied the bucket in the utility sink, and he watched the gray water spiral down, and he thought about a 9-year-old girl standing in front of a class with a poster. Then he went up to 38. Olivia Bennett was still at her desk. She was always still at her desk. 11 months, and he'd seen her leave before 10 o'clock, maybe 4 times. 32 years old, running a company of 1,100 people, and she ate dinner out of the vending machine on 38 because she didn't want to be seen going out for food while the finance team was working late. Daniel knew that because she'd told him. 6 weeks ago, the first time she'd ever spoken to him. He'd been vacuuming outside her office at 11 p.m., and she'd opened the door, and he'd shut the machine off and said, "Sorry, ma'am, I'll come back." And she'd said, "No, please. Actually, can I ask you something, ma'am? Do you ever eat?" He'd looked at her. Sorry that came out strange. She'd laughed at herself. She had a good laugh, the kind that was clearly annoyed at itself for existing. "I mean, I've been here until 11, 12, 4 nights a week for a year and a half. And I've never seen you take a break. Not once. And I thought either that man has some kind of superhuman constitution, or he's like me and he's decided food is optional." I eat at 3. 3 in the morning. Yes, ma'am. What do you eat at 3 in the morning? Whatever my daughter didn't finish. She'd gone quiet. Then, how old? 9. What's her name? And that had been the moment. That had been the exact moment where he should have said, I need to get back to work, ma'am, because the number one rule of being invisible is that you do not let anyone hand you a name. Emma, he'd said. Emma. Olivia Bennett had smiled. My dad worked nights when I was little, loading dock. He used to leave me a note in the kitchen every night so it'd be there in the morning. Just dumb stuff, riddles, bad jokes. That's a good thing to do. It was. She'd looked past him at nothing for a second. He built all this, and I feel like every day I'm about 10 minutes from finding out I'm not him. Ma'am, sorry, it's midnight. I'm oversharing at a stranger. She'd stepped back into her office. Good night. I'm sorry. What's your name? I should know your name. That's inexcusable. Daniel. Good night, Daniel. That was 6 weeks ago. And every night since, without fail, when he'd come to 38, there had been a granola bar sitting on the corner of the reception desk with a sticky note that said 3 a.m. He had eaten every single one of them at 3 in the morning. He had never told her that. Tonight 38 was different. Tonight there was no granola bar. Tonight Olivia Bennett's office door was open, and she was standing over her desk with both hands flat on it, and there were 3 men in her office, and one of them was named Richard Vaughn. Daniel stopped his cart at the far end of the hall and began very slowly to wipe down a door frame that did not need wiping. Not signing anything at midnight, Richard. Olivia, please sit down. I'm fine standing. You've been awake for 20 hours. You're emotional. Do not. Her voice cracked like a whip, and Daniel's hand paused on the door frame. Do not use that word with me. Not you. My father hired you when you were selling copiers. Your father, Vaughn said, was a great man who could not read a balance sheet, and you inherited his eyesight. $11 million, Richard. Silence. $11 million, she said again. Moved through 4 vendors that don't have offices. One of them has a UPS store as its corporate address, in Nevada. I have the wire confirmations. You have partial documentation of a restructuring you weren't briefed on. I'm the CEO. You're the founder's daughter. Vaughn said it gently. That was the worst part. He said it the way you'd tell somebody their dog was old. There's a difference, and everyone in that boardroom knows it but you. Daniel put down the rag. He picked it back up. Not your problem, not your problem, not your, the Meridian files are gone, Olivia said. 9 years of clinical modeling. The diagnostic engine. My father's the entire reason this company exists, and the repository was cloned to an external endpoint on Sunday night at 11:40 p.m. I have the log. Sunday, 11 p.m. 4 contractors. Vaughn signed them in himself. You have a log, Vaughn repeated. I have a log. Do you know how many logs I have? And now his voice changed. Now the gentleness went out of it the way heat goes out of a room when a door opens. I have a log of every decision you've made in 19 months. I have a log of the Tacoma expansion. I have a log of you hiring a chief technology officer who lasted 5 months. I have 400 pages of documentation showing a young woman in over her head, and on Thursday morning, I am going to walk into that boardroom, and I am going to be kind about it, Olivia, because I promised your father I would look after you. Get out of my office. Sign the transition agreement tonight, and you keep the title. You keep the office. You keep the stock. You keep your father's name on the building. Get out of my office. And if you don't sign it, Vaughn said, then on Thursday, I don't have to be kind. Daniel heard footsteps. He pushed his cart 6 feet down the hall and knelt to check a baseboard. 3 men came out. Vaughn first straightening his cuff, then the gray polo man from 37, then a third younger, heavier, and he was the one who glanced at Daniel. Daniel let his shoulders round, let his chin drop, let his eyes go dull and slow and fix on nothing. Category cleaner. File and forget. The man looked away. They got in the elevator. Daniel stayed on one knee by the baseboard for 11 seconds after the doors closed. Then he stood up and he went back to work, and his hands were completely steady. And that fact bothered him more than anything else that had happened that night. At 12:50, he came around to 38 again for the trash. Olivia was sitting on the floor. Not at her desk. On the floor with her back against the front of it, shoes off a legal pad next to her that she wasn't writing on. When she saw him in the doorway, she didn't scramble up. She just looked at him with an expression he recognized instantly because he'd seen it on 22-year-old kids in the back of a helicopter. "I don't know if I can do this, and I can't tell anyone. Sorry, ma'am." He reached for the trash bin. "Daniel." "Ma'am." "How much did you hear?" He could have said nothing. It would have been the easy thing. It would have been the smart thing. "Enough," he said. She let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Great. Fantastic. So it's not just in my head." "No, ma'am. You know what the worst part is?" She pulled her knees up. "He's right about one thing. I'm 32. I got this job because my last name is on the lobby. Every single person in that building is polite to my face and does math about me behind my back. And Richard has been here 19 years, and he's good at it. He really is. And if he walks into that boardroom Thursday and says she's not ready..." She snapped her fingers. 9 men will nod, because it's the thing they already think. "Then don't let it be about you." She looked up sharply. "What?" Daniel set the trash bin down. He should not have set the trash bin down. "He wants Thursday to be a conversation about whether you're good enough," he said. "Because that's a conversation he wins. Nobody can prove they're good enough. It's not a provable thing." He shrugged. "So don't have that conversation. Have a different one." "Which one?" $11 million and a Nevada mailbox. Olivia Bennett stared at him. "That's what he's afraid of," Daniel said. "Not you. Notice he came at midnight. Notice he brought 2 men who don't work here. Notice he offered you the title, the office, the stock, and your father's name on the building, everything except the books. A man who's winning doesn't come at midnight, and he doesn't offer that much." The silence went on for a while. "Who are you?" she said, and Daniel Carter felt the floor tilt about 2 degrees under him the way it does when you realize you've walked farther out than you meant to. "I'm the guy who cleans these halls," he said, and picked up the trash bin. "Daniel." "Ma'am, I'm behind on 39. "Daniel." She got up off the floor. In her socks. 5'4" in her socks, and she came around the desk and stood in front of him. "My father spent 30 years around men who talk. He used to say the ones who scared him were the ones who counted the exits." He didn't answer. "You counted the exits when you walked in," she said. "You've done it every night for a year. I noticed 6 weeks ago, and I've been trying to figure out why ever since." "Good night, ma'am." "Olivia." "Good night, ma'am." He got out of the office. He got the cart down the hall. His pulse was at 71, and he knew it was at 71. And that was the part that scared him, because a normal man's heart doesn't stay at 71 when a woman tells him she can see straight through him. At 1:20, he found the stairwell door on 36 propped with a folded piece of cardboard. At 1:26, he found a coffee cup in the north stairwell, still warm on the landing between 36 and 37 a floor, with no break room, no vending, and no reason for anyone to be standing. At 1:31 in the freight elevator lobby, he found a black nylon bag under the fire cabinet. He crouched. He didn't touch it. He tilted his head and looked at the zipper pull at the way the bag sat at the corner where the fabric had gone shiny from being set down on concrete 1,000 times. He knew that bag. Not that bag, but that kind of bag. He'd carried one for 11 years. Walk away. He put 2 fingers on the zipper. Walk away, Daniel. He opened it 4 inches. Inside 2 coils of flexible restraint, a roll of gaffer tape, a radio off, a folded floor plan of the 38th floor with 3 positions marked in pencil, 1 at the door, 1 at the table, 1 behind the window seat, 1 behind, and underneath the floor plan, a printed photograph. Daniel looked at it for a long, long time. It was Olivia Bennett coming out of a coffee shop on 5th. Long lens. 2 days old judging by the coat. He closed the bag. He put it back exactly as he'd found it with the zipper pull at the same angle, and he stood up, and he walked to the utility closet on 36, and he shut the door, and he put both hands flat against the wall, and he breathed. In 4. Hold 4. Out 4. Because here's what he knew, and it was the only thing he'd ever been truly excellent at: restraints and tape and a radio and a floor plan is not a robbery. Nobody restrains people to steal a server. That's a control package. That's what you bring when you intend to put people in a room and keep them there until a document has a signature on it. And they had marked tonight on the floor plan. Not Thursday. Thursday's the boardroom, Daniel thought. Thursday's the show. Tonight's the rehearsal. Tonight they get the signature. And Thursday Vaughn walks in and reads it out loud. He looked at his watch. 1:38. He thought about Emma. He thought about her crooked ponytail. He thought about the poster. He thought about a woman named Denise Ramirez saying, "Was it worth it, Danny?" and about 11 living rooms, and about a coffee can in a closet under a bag of Christmas lights. He thought, if I call 911, they take 12 minutes, and by then there's a signature on a page, and 3 men in the wind, and 1 woman who voluntarily resigned. He thought, if I do nothing, she signs it. That's all. She signs it, and she's fine. Nobody dies over a signature. And then he thought about the second coil of restraint, because there was only 1 CEO in that building tonight. So who was the second one for Biao? Samad. He took the north stairs up, not the elevator. He went up 2 floors and stopped because he was not going to walk into a room with 3 trained men and a bad plan. And he did not in fact have a plan, and there is a specific kind of arrogance that gets people killed. And Daniel Carter had spent 11 years watching it happen to better men than him. So he did what he'd been trained to do before anything else. He got information. He went to the 37th floor security closet, keyed it with a master he technically wasn't supposed to have, and pulled up the camera feed on a monitor that had been showing a screensaver of a mountain since 2019. 38. Executive floor. Olivia in her office at her desk. Elevator lobby empty. Northwest corner freight elevator, the camera that had been turned 8 degrees. He looked at that dead angle for 3 full seconds. Then he called the only number he had for anyone in that building. Marcus picked up on the 4th ring. Front desk. It's Daniel. Man, you sound weird. Marcus, listen to me and don't ask questions yet. Is Vaughn in the building? A pause. Keys. Badged out at 12:14. Did he badge back in? No. Did anybody badge in after him? Longer pause. Daniel could hear him scrolling. 3 visitor passes, Marcus said slowly. Issued at 12:31. Sponsor field says R. Vaughn. Escort required, no escort logged. His voice had changed completely. 22 years of Air Force came up through it, like bedrock. Daniel, where are you? 37. Where's Miss Bennett? 38. In her office. Alone. I'm calling PD. Do it. Then get in your car. The hell I will. Marcus. Daniel closed his eyes. You've got a bad knee and no vest and a flashlight. You call the police, you lock the lobby, and you keep the elevator on the ground floor so nobody leaves. That's the job. That's your job tonight. And what's yours? Daniel didn't answer. Daniel. Marcus's voice dropped. Man, who are you? I'm the janitor, Daniel said, and hung up. He went down the hall and got his cart. That was the part that would confuse people afterward. That was the part Olivia would ask him about 100 times over the next 6 months. You had 5 minutes. You went and got the mop cart. Yes, he got the mop cart, because 3 men in a room look at a door when it opens. What they look for is a threat. And there is no threat on earth shaped like a 50-something guy in gray coveralls pushing a squeaky yellow bucket, and every second their brains spend filing him under nothing is a second he doesn't have to spend fighting. He'd learned that in a country he wasn't allowed to say the name of. The best weapon in any room is the 4 seconds before anyone believes you're dangerous. He took the north stairs. 2 at a time, Quiet Cart actually carried 41 pounds held out from his body so it wouldn't knock the rail, and set it down on the 38th floor landing without a sound. Then he pushed it out into the hallway and let the wheel squeak because now he wanted it to. The office door was closed. It had been open 40 minutes ago. Through it 40 feet away, he heard a man's voice say, "Sign the page, Miss Bennett." And he heard Olivia say, "No." And he heard something hit the desk hard enough to rattle it. Daniel kept pushing the cart, same speed, same squeak. He was counting again, 1 woman, 3 men, 1 at the door, 1 at the table, 1 behind her by the window. 30 feet. "You're making this stupid," the man said. "You know how this ends. Everybody signs." "My father didn't." "Your father's dead." 20 feet. Daniel felt it come up in him. Not rage. Rage he could have managed. Rage he'd had 100 times, and it was loud and useless, and it made you slow. This was the other thing. The old thing. The cold, quiet, terrible calm that used to come down over him like a helmet where the world went to half speed, and every object in a room turned into either cover a weapon or a person. And he stopped being a man with a name and became a tool that solved problems. He had spent 4 years running from this feeling. It came back like it had never left. It came back like it had been waiting in the closet with the coffee can. 10 feet. "Sarah," he thought. "I'm sorry." M. "Baby, I'm sorry." 5 feet. Inside, Olivia Bennett said in a voice with absolutely nothing left in it, "Take your hand off me." Daniel Carter put 1 hand on the door. And for the first time in 4 years, 3 months and 19 days, he stopped pretending. The door opened. Not fast. Daniel had never once in his life opened a door fast. He pushed it with the cart the way a man does when his hands are full and his mind is somewhere else, and he came into that office at the exact speed of a tired employee who had gotten the floors mixed up. 4 faces turned toward him. The one at the door was closest 6 feet away, gray polo weight on his back foot. The one at the table had a folder open and a pen in his hand, and he did not look up for a full second, which told Daniel everything about who was in charge and who was hired. And the third man had 1 hand on Olivia Bennett's shoulder, holding her against the glass, and his other hand was flat on the desk beside the paper. Olivia's eyes found him. Daniel watched her face do 3 things in half a second. Recognition. Hope. Then a terrible, sick understanding that a janitor had just walked into a room with 3 men in it. "No," she said. "Daniel, go." "Sorry," Daniel said. "I got the wrong floor." Gray Polo laughed. It was a short, ugly, relieved sound. "Yeah, you did, pal. I'll come back. You'll do more than that." Gray Polo took a step. "Come here." "Sir, I'm just here for the trash." "I said come here." And Daniel came here. That was the thing nobody ever expected. Everyone expects a man to back up. Backing up is what a scared man does, and a scared man moving backward is easy to walk down. Daniel walked forward into the space where Gray Polo was already committing his weight, and Gray Polo's body had to make a decision it had not planned to make. The cart came with him. 41 pounds of steel frame and dirty water driven low and hard into the man's shins. He went down over it. Not gracefully. He went down the way furniture goes down, and his hands came out, and his forearm landed across the metal edge of the frame, and Daniel put his palm on the back of that elbow and dropped his own weight through it. The sound was not loud. That was the worst part. It was a small, dry, private sound. And then Gray Polo started making a noise like a man trying to breathe through a straw. Daniel was already moving. "Hey, hey!" The one at the table was up chair going back, and Daniel took the mop out of the bucket in 1 hand, and he did not swing it at the man's head, because heads are hard and they move. He swung it at the man's knee. The handle was aluminum and 42 inches long, and it came in on a diagonal from low right, and there is very little a human being can do about that. The man folded sideways into the credenza. A photograph of a man in a hard hat at a ribbon cutting Olivia's father 20 years younger went off the top of it and hit the carpet face down. The third man let go of Olivia's shoulder. He came off the window fast, and this one was different. Daniel saw it in the first step. This one didn't rush. This one moved his feet like they were expensive, and his hands came up to his chest, and he did not throw anything yet. Trained. "Okay," the man said. "Okay." Daniel dropped the mop. "Olivia," he said without taking his eyes off the man. "Behind me. Now." She didn't move. "Miss Bennett?" She moved. She came around the side of the desk with her back scraping the glass, and she got behind him, and Daniel felt her hand grab a fistful of the back of his coveralls, and he thought absurdly, "Emma does that. Emma does that in parking lots." "You made a mistake, buddy," the third man said. "Probably. You know what this is. You know who's paying for this." "Richard Vaughn," Daniel said. That stopped him, just for a heartbeat. But a heartbeat was a very long time. "You want to think about your job," the man said. "I'm thinking about it. You got a family." And there it was. Daniel had been in 100 rooms with 100 men, and there was always the one who reached for that. It was supposed to be a lever. It was supposed to be the thing that made a man's arms heavy. "Yeah," Daniel said. "I do." Then he stepped in. It took 4 seconds. Olivia would say later that she never actually saw it. She saw the man start to raise his hands, and then she saw the ceiling. No, that wasn't right. She saw the man see the ceiling, and there was a sound like a phone book dropped on a table. And then Daniel Carter was kneeling on the man's back, with the man's wrist folded up between his shoulder blades, and he wasn't even breathing hard. 10 seconds after that, the man was zip-tied with restraints from his own bag. Daniel had gone and gotten the bag. He'd left it under the fire cabinet, and he'd walked back out into the hall while the man was still on the floor and retrieved it and come back, and he'd used their own restraints on all 3 of them. And Olivia Bennett stood in the middle of her own office with her arms wrapped around herself and watched a night janitor secure 3 men to a conference table leg with the calm efficiency of a man loading a dishwasher. It was 1:53 in the morning. "Miss Bennett?" She didn't answer. "Olivia." "What?" "Are you hurt?" She looked down at herself like she genuinely had to check. "No." "Did any of them touch you before I came in?" "He had my shoulder. He had me against the—" She stopped. Her jaw was doing something. "No, I'm not hurt." "Okay." Daniel stood up. "Sit down." "I don't want to sit down." "You're going to in about 30 seconds anyway. Better to choose it." She sat down, right there on the floor back against the desk, same as an hour ago, and her hands started shaking so hard she had to press them flat against her own thighs. "There it is," Daniel said quietly. "What is this?" "Adrenaline dump. It's normal. It'll pass in about 10 minutes. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer that one. On the floor, Gray Polo said through his teeth, "You're dead. You know that. You're dead, man. You don't even know what you just—" "Hey." Daniel crouched next to him. Not close, just enough. "Do you know what a stress fracture in the ulna feels like in about 4 hours?" The man stopped talking. "You've got a long night. Save your voice." At 1:58, the phone on Olivia's desk rang. She jumped like she'd been shot. Daniel picked it up. "Yeah." "Daniel?" Marcus's voice tight as a wire. "Daniel PD's 4 minutes out. They're rolling 2 cars. I've got the lobby locked and the elevators." "Daniel, are you? Is she?" "She's fine. I've got 3 individuals restrained on 38. Tell PD there's no weapons deployed, and 1 guy needs an ambulance for an arm." Silence on the line. "An arm?" Marcus repeated. "Marcus." "Yeah." "Don't come up." Man, I'm 60 in November. I ain't coming up, but I want you to know I got a mag light and I thought about it. Daniel almost laughed. It came out as nothing. He hung up. Olivia was staring at him from the floor. You called security before you came in here, she said. I called Marcus and police. Before? Yes. How long before, Ma? 12 minutes. You knew 12 minutes ago that men were coming to my office to... Her voice failed on that. She started over. You knew... I found their bag on 36. Their... Olivia pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. Okay, their bag. Okay. Restraints tape a radio and a floor plan of this office with 3 positions marked. Daniel paused. And a photograph of you leaving the coffee place on 5th, taken with a long lens 2 days ago. She took her hands off her eyes. There were 2 sets of restraints, Daniel said. Only one of you in the building. What? They brought 2. I'd like to know who the second one was for. At 2:04, the elevator chimed, and the 38th floor filled with Seattle police. What happened over the next 40 minutes was in Daniel's experience entirely predictable and entirely useless. The first officer through the door was 26 years old and had his hand on his weapon, and he pointed it at the only man standing, which was Daniel, which was correct procedure, and Daniel got down on his knees with his fingers laced behind his head before anyone told him to, which the officer found so unnerving that he actually said, Sir, have you done this before? Yes. Olivia was on her feet by then, saying, No, he's the one he's the reason he works here, and it took 4 minutes to get it straightened out, and Daniel stayed on his knees the entire 4 minutes because he had learned a long time ago that being right is not the same as being safe. They cut the zip ties. They cuffed the 3 men properly. Gray Polo went out on a gurney at 2:31 with his arm in a temporary splint, and on the way past, he turned his head and looked at Daniel and said very clearly, Ballard. Just that. 1 word. Daniel's face didn't change, but something behind his ribs went very, very cold. At 2:40, a detective named Ruiz sat on the corner of a table in the 38th floor conference room with a notebook she wasn't writing in. So walk me through it again. They were in her office. I came in. You came in. Yes. With a mop cart. Yes. Mr. Carter. Ruiz was maybe 45, and she had the flat, patient, deeply unimpressed manner of someone who had heard 4,000 versions of what happened. 3 men. One of them's got a spiral fracture of the ulna. One's got a knee that's gonna need an MRI. One's got a hyperextended shoulder, and he won't say a word, not 1 word, not even his name. And you're telling me you did that with a mop? I did that with a cart, a mop handle, and the floor. In how long? I didn't time it. Guess. 6 seconds. Ruiz looked at him. You want to tell me where a night custodian learns that? No, ma'am. That's not really an option here. Then I served 11 years in the Navy, and I'd rather not go into the rest of it. And if you run me, you'll find a DD-214 with a lot of gray on it, and if you call the number on it, somebody will call you back and tell you I'm not interesting. Ruiz wrote something down for the first time. You're going to be interesting to a lot of people by lunch, she said. At 3:10 in the morning, Daniel Carter sat on a bench in the lobby of Everhart Solutions with a paper cup of coffee that Marcus had put in his hands, and that he had not drunk, and he did the thing he had been not doing for the last 70 minutes. He thought about the word Ballard. He'd never told anyone at that company where he lived. It wasn't on his badge. It was on a W-4 in an HR file that a vice president of operations could pull in about 9 seconds. He took out his phone. The babysitter, Mrs. Novak, was 71 and slept in the recliner and did not appreciate being called at 3 in the morning, and Daniel called her anyway. She picked up on the second ring, which was wrong. Mrs. Novak. Daniel. Her voice was thin. Daniel, I was going to call you. I didn't want to be it's probably nothing. Everything in Daniel's chest stopped. Tell me. There was a car. Where? Across the street, since maybe 11, and I thought, well, people park. She was talking too fast now. But nobody got out. And around 1 in the morning I got up for the bathroom, and the light was still on inside it like somebody's phone. And Daniel, when I went to the window, it drove away. Is Emma asleep? She's asleep, she's fine. She's got that stuffed rabbit. Mrs. Nowak, listen to me. Go to Emma's room right now and stay in it. Lock the door. Don't turn on any lights. Daniel, you're scaring. Please. He heard her getting out of the chair. He heard the floor. He was already moving across the lobby. Marcus? Yeah. I need your car. At 3:24. A 2016 Ford Explorer that smelled like cigarettes and pine air freshener took the on-ramp to 5 North at a speed that would have gotten a normal man a ticket. And Daniel Carter drove with his phone against his ear and his mind doing arithmetic. Vaughn badged out at 12:14. He knew the job was live. He would have had someone on the family from the start. That's what you do. That's what I would have done. Second set of restraints. Because a man like Vaughn didn't want a fight. A man like Vaughn wanted a lever. And there is exactly one lever that works on a father. The phone rang. Daniel. Olivia. Not a good time. They found something. Ruiz, the detective, she pulled the badge log, and there's a 4th visitor pass issued at 12:31. There were 4 of them, Daniel. One of them never came up to 38. I know. You know. Second set of restraints. He changed lanes. Olivia, I have to go. Where are you going? Home. She was quiet for exactly 1 second. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely, and Daniel would remember it later as the first moment he understood who she actually was under the job. Give me the address. No. Daniel, I'm not putting you in a car at 3 in the morning. I'm not God. I'm not driving there. I'm sitting in a building full of police officers, and one of them is a detective who owes me a statement. Give me the address, and I'll have a car there in 6 minutes, instead of you being alone in it in 14. Daniel didn't say anything for 2 blocks. Then he gave her the address. At 3:38, he came off the exit into Ballard and killed the headlights a block out, which was a thing he did without thinking, and did not notice he had done. There was no car across the street. The porch light was off. He had left it on. Emma always turned it no. Mrs. Nowak turned off lights. Mrs. Nowak was 71 and turned off every light in the house out of habit, and he had told her 4 times not to, and she did it anyway. The front door was closed. Daniel sat in the car for 11 seconds and made himself look at the entire street instead of the house. 2 vehicles he recognized. One, he didn't, a gray sedan 4 doors down, empty cold hood. He went in through the side gate. The kitchen window was intact. The back door was locked. He put his key in it, and it turned, and he stepped into his own kitchen at 3:41 in the morning and heard nothing. Nothing at all. Mrs. Nowak? Nothing. He went down the hall. Emma's door was closed. There was a chair jammed under the handle on the outside. Daniel stood there and looked at that chair and felt something happen in his chest that he could not have described to anyone ever and would not have wanted to. Because a chair on the outside means somebody put it there. He moved the chair. He opened the door. Mrs. Nowak was sitting on the floor with her back against Emma's bed and a cast-iron skillet in her lap, and her face gray as paper. Emma was behind her awake, sitting up hair-wrecked holding the rabbit. Dad! Daniel got across that room faster than he had moved all night. He came in the front, Mrs. Nowak said in the flat mechanical voice of a woman running on the last of herself. I heard it at 3. I heard the handle. So I put the chair from the outside before because I thought if it looks like a closet, if it doesn't look like a room somebody's in. You put the chair on the outside and then came back in through the hallway. Yes. And I shut it behind me and I sat down. And I heard him in the hall. Her hands tightened on the skillet. And he pushed it. He pushed the door and it didn't give and he went away. Daniel closed his eyes for 1 second. Mrs. Nowak. Yes. That was the single smartest thing anybody has done tonight. The old woman started to cry. silently embarrassed, wiping at it with the back of her wrist. Emma said, "Dad, your hands are bleeding." He looked down. The knuckles on his right hand were split. He genuinely had not noticed. "It's fine, Em." "It's not fine, you're getting it on my blanket." And then she was against his chest, and she was 9, and she was making a sound he had heard exactly twice before in his life, once at a funeral, and once at 3 years old, with a broken arm. At 3:47, blue and red lights came through the front curtains. At 4:05, an officer found a man's boot print in the flower bed under the living room window and a second one on the back step, and the gray sedan 4 doors down came back registered to a leasing company in Kent that had leased 11 vehicles that month to a corporate account. The corporate account was Everhart Solutions. Detective Ruiz arrived at 4:40 with 2 coffees and gave one to Mrs. Nowak, which Daniel noticed and filed away and decided he'd remember about her. "Mr. Carter? Detective? Your ex-employer's fleet account paid for the vehicle that sat outside your daughter's window tonight." "He's not my ex-employer. I still work there." Ruiz's mouth moved about a millimeter. "Sure. Have you picked Vaughn up?" "We've asked him to come in." "You've asked him." "Mr. Carter." She said it patiently. "I've got 3 men in custody. 2 of them won't talk. The third one, the one you broke, has a lawyer who was standing at the desk at 4 in the morning wearing a tie. That's not a public defender. That's a man who was awake. And nobody has said the name Richard Vaughn out loud yet, and a leased car doesn't put him in a room." "He signed the visitor passes himself." "He signed 3, Ruiz said. "The 4th pass was issued off his sponsor code at 12:31, and at 12:31, he was badged out of the building and on camera in a parking garage 2 blocks away, which is very convenient." She sipped her coffee. "Almost like he wanted to be on camera." Daniel looked out at the street. "He didn't issue that 4th pass," he said slowly. "No. Somebody else has his code. Or he gave it to somebody, either way." Ruiz shut her notebook. "Mr. Carter, I've been doing this 19 years, and I want to tell you something that you can take however you want. Guys like the 3 upstairs you rent for $4,000, that's a fist fight in a hallway. But somebody put a man on a 9-year-old's window on the same night with the same clock off a corporate fleet account, and that's not $4,000. That's an operation. Somebody with a budget looked at a schedule and said, 'We need pressure on the CEO, and we need pressure on anybody who might help her.' Nobody knew I'd help her." Ruiz looked at him for a long moment. "Then why was there a car outside your house at 11 o'clock at night?" she said. "An hour before anyone went up to 38. Daniel did not have an answer for that. At 5:20 in the morning, Emma finally fell asleep on the couch with her head on his leg, and Daniel sat in the dark of his own living room with a police cruiser idling outside and stared at the wall and let the question turn over. 11 o'clock. They'd put a car on his house before the operation started, before he'd found the bag, before he'd done a single thing, which meant they hadn't been watching him because of tonight. They'd been watching him before. At 6:15 his phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't have saved. "Is Emma okay?" He looked at it for a while. "She's asleep," he typed. "Mrs. Nowak is a hero. 3 dots. I want to pay for a hotel. For all 3 of you. Please don't be proud about this at 6 in the morning. We're fine, Daniel, Miss Bennett. If a man wants to find us a hotel is easier than a house. Houses have neighbors." A long pause. "Okay," she wrote. "Then I'm sorry." "For what?" "I've been sitting in a police station for 4 hours, and everyone keeps telling me how lucky I am. And all I can think about is that a 9-year-old had a man at her window because I refused to sign a piece of paper." Daniel read it twice. "That's not what happened," he wrote. "It is. No. A 9-year-old had a man at her window because a man chose to put him there. You didn't do that. Don't take his part for him. He doesn't need the help. The dots came and went 3 times. Finally, my father would have liked you." At 7:40 in the morning, Emma woke up and asked if she still had to go to school. "No." "So do I still have to do the poster?" Daniel rubbed his eyes. What? The poster. About what you do. She was sitting up now, blanket around her shoulders, and she was watching his face very closely, the way she had learned to when she was 5, and everything in her world had come apart in one night. Dad? Yeah. Those police officers kept saying stuff about you. What kind of stuff? They said you stopped 3 guys. Emma pulled the blanket tighter. One of them said it to another one in the kitchen, and he said the word Jesus, like not mad, like the other way. Daniel didn't say anything. Are you going to tell me what you did before? She asked. And there it was. 4 years he'd known this question was in the house somewhere sitting in a closet with a coffee can under a bag of Christmas lights. Yeah, he said. But not this morning. When? Soon. That's what you said about the swimming lessons. You got the swimming lessons. In July. At 9:05 that morning, Everhart Solutions issued an internal memo to 1,100 employees stating that there had been a security incident on the executive floor overnight, that all personnel were safe, and that the company was cooperating fully with law enforcement. At 9:12, Richard Vaughn walked into the building. At 9:40, he sat down in a conference room with 2 attorneys and a detective and expressed shock and grief and a great deal of concern for Olivia, and said the words, I've been telling the board for a year that our security posture was inadequate. And the words, I want to be very clear that I want whoever did this found. And he said them so well that one of the attorneys actually believed him. At 10:15, he stood alone in the elevator, going up to 39, and took out his personal phone and typed 4 words. Who is the janitor? At 11:30, a man in Kirkland, who had never worked for Everhart Solutions and never would, who billed through a consultancy with a website that had been registered 8 months ago, opened a file with a photograph in it. The photograph was pulled from a lobby camera, low resolution, a 50-something man in gray coveralls pushing a cart. Under it, someone had already run a partial and gotten a name. Under the name was a service record with 11 years in it, and 4 of those years were redacted. And the man in Kirkland looked at the redactions for a long time. Then he made a call. Yeah, he said, we have a problem. It's not a janitor. At 12:02 in the afternoon, Daniel Carter woke up on his own couch after 2 hours of sleep with his phone vibrating against his chest. Marcus. Daniel? Yeah. You sitting down? I'm lying down. HR called me an hour ago. Marcus's voice was strange. They terminated you. Daniel sat up. Say that again. You're fired, brother. Effective this morning. Gross misconduct, unauthorized access to restricted systems, violation of the workplace violence policy. Marcus made a sound that had no humor in it at all. You broke into the security closet on 37. That's what they got you on. That's real, man, you did do that. Who signed it? That's the thing, it didn't come from Vaughn. A pause. It came from legal, from a woman named Karen Ashby, who's been the general counsel for 6 years, and who I have never in my life heard say one interesting thing. Daniel stood up. He walked to the window. The cruiser out front was gone. The officer had left at 10. Marcus? Yeah. How'd they know about the security closet? I keyed into the 37th floor security closet at 1:34 in the morning. There's no camera in that closet. The only record of it is a door log. Daniel closed his eyes. Somebody pulled a door log at 7 in the morning and built a termination out of it in under 2 hours. On the day after their own executive got assaulted in her office. That's not HR. HR takes 4 days to reset a password. Marcus was quiet. Somebody wanted me out of that building before lunch, Daniel said. Man. Marcus exhaled. Man, what are you going to do? Daniel looked down the hall at the door with the chair marks on the handle. I'm going to go get my badge back, he said. At 12:40 in the afternoon, Daniel called Olivia Bennett and got 4 seconds of silence before she said anything at all. They what? Terminated, effective this morning. Daniel, I am the chief executive officer of that company. Then you should probably read your own mail. I have been in a police station since 2 in the morning, Olivia said, and he could hear her walking now fast heels on tile. I have not read anything. I gave a statement 4 times to 3 different people, and one of them asked me if I'd had anything to drink last night. Hold on. He held on. She came back in 90 seconds, and her voice had gone somewhere flat and dangerous. It's in my inbox. It's CC'd to me. 7:41 a.m. Who sent it? Karen Ashby. General Counsel. 6 years. She goes to my aunt's Christmas thing. Olivia stopped walking. Daniel. She wrote a termination for cause on a man who stopped an assault in my office, and she CC'd me on it, and then she went to a 9 o'clock meeting and didn't mention it. Ask her why. I'm going to do better than ask her why. At 1:15, Karen Ashby sat down across from her own CEO in a conference room on 39, with the door closed and a legal pad she never touched, and for 11 minutes she said the words policy and exposure and precedent in every possible combination. And then Olivia said quietly, Karen, look at me. Ashby looked at her, and she started crying. Not the polite kind. The kind that comes up out of a person who has been holding a door shut with her shoulder for a long time. They sent me a picture of my son, she said. Olivia didn't move. Ethan's a sophomore. He's at Western. Ashby wiped her face with the flat of her hand, furious at herself. Yesterday afternoon, 4:20 p.m. A photograph of him walking out of the science building with his headphones in. No message, no text. Just the picture from a number that doesn't exist anymore. Yesterday afternoon, Olivia repeated. Before. Before what? Before anything happened. Before they came to my office. Olivia felt her own hands go cold in her lap. Karen, whoever sent you that photograph knew last night was going to happen 12 hours before it happened. And they knew you'd be the one asked to clean it up. At 1:50, Detective Ruiz called Daniel and told him 2 things he did not want to hear. The first was that all 3 men had been arraigned, and 2 of them had already posted at 11:15 in the morning in cash by a bail bondsman who arrived with the number pre-written on the paperwork. The second was that the attorney standing at the desk at 4 a.m. billed his hours to a consultancy in Kirkland called the Halcyon Group. Never heard of it, Daniel said. Nobody has. Registered 8 months ago. Website's 4 pages of stock photography and the phrase risk advisory 11 times. Ruiz sounded like a woman reading a menu she didn't like. But they've got a defense subcontracting number and a mailing address in a building that also houses a dentist. Who's the principal? That's the part I called about. It's a shell inside a shell. Managing member is listed as an LLC in Delaware, and that LLC's registered agent is a service company in Wilmington that has 4,000 clients. A pause. But the site's SSL certificate was bought with a corporate card that has a name attached because somebody was lazy in month 1, and I've got a warrant request in. How long? In this town, Friday. Thursday's the board meeting. I know what Thursday is, Mr. Carter. At 2:30, Daniel Carter put his daughter, a 71-year-old woman, 1 duffel bag, 1 stuffed rabbit, and 1 cast-iron skillet into a borrowed Ford Explorer, and drove 40 minutes northeast to a house outside Snohomish that belonged to a man named Roy Delacroix, who had flown refueling tankers for 26 years, who was Marcus Webb's brother-in-law, and who met them in the driveway in a flannel shirt with a coffee cup in his hand and did not ask a single question. Roy. Daniel. This is Emma. This is Mrs. Nowak. Ma'am. Roy nodded at the old woman. Is that a skillet? It is. Good, Roy said. Kitchen's through there, and I'll be honest with you, it's the best cookware in the house. Emma looked up at her father. How long are we staying here? A couple days. That's not a number. M. That's not a number, Dad, that's a thing adults say. Roy laughed out loud and told her the chickens were hers if she wanted them, and Emma, who had never touched a chicken in her life, said she would think about it in a tone that suggested she was doing him a favor. At 3:10, Daniel sat on the tailgate of Roy's truck with his daughter beside him, and he did the thing he had been putting off for 4 years, 3 months and 20 days. "I was in the Navy," he said. "I know. You know the part where I fix things on ships." Emma didn't say anything. She was 9, and she was smart, and she waited. "That's not what I did." "Okay." "I was a SEAL, Emma." She was quiet for a second, then very carefully, like she was checking a step for ice. "Like in the movies?" "No." "Then like what?" "Like a job." Daniel turned the words over. "Like a job where you go into places at night and you get somebody out, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, you drive to somebody's house in a uniform and you tell their wife." Emma's eyes were enormous. "Did you have to do that?" 11 times. She thought about it. 9-year-olds think in a way adults have forgotten how to do straight through the middle of a thing. "Is that why you stopped?" "Yeah." "Is that why you're a janitor?" "That's why I'm a janitor." Emma leaned into his side and didn't say anything for a while, and then she said, "Kayla's gonna feel really stupid." And Daniel Carter laughed until his eyes stung. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Olivia Bennett drove out to Snohomish in a car she'd rented under her assistant's name because Daniel had told her not to drive her own, and she brought a laptop and a printed folder and 110 pages of things nobody was supposed to have. "You shouldn't have come here. You gave me the address. I gave you the address at 3 in the morning when a man was standing outside my daughter's window. And now I'm here in the daylight and nobody followed me, and I checked 6 times, and if you're about to tell me you'd have checked better, you're right, and I don't care." She put the laptop on the hood. "Sit down and look at this." He looked at it. The Meridian repository had been cloned on Sunday at 11:41 p.m. to an external endpoint. That much she'd already told him. What she hadn't known Sunday, and what a security consultant she'd hired privately on Tuesday had found for her, was that the clone was the 3rd one. "Third," Daniel said. "There were 2 before. February and April. Partials." Olivia's finger was steady on the screen and her voice was not. "Somebody's been taking my father's work out of this company for 5 months. Sunday wasn't the theft, Daniel. Sunday was the last trip. Sunday was them backing the truck up because they were done. Which means Thursday isn't about the company." "What?" "Vaughn doesn't need the CEO chair to steal a file. He's already stolen the file." Daniel stood up off the tailgate. "He needs the chair so that when somebody eventually notices the file is gone, there's a 19-year executive sitting in it who can explain very calmly that the previous CEO was disorganized and in over her head, and unfortunately there were some data governance failures under her leadership." Olivia stared at him. "He's not taking the company," she said slowly. "He's taking the blame off. He's building a story. That's all Thursday is. It's a story with 9 men in the audience." At 5:30 they found the name. It came out of the endpoint. The clone had gone to a cloud bucket, and the bucket had been created by an account, and the account had been billed to a corporate card, and the consultant Olivia had hired had gotten one screenshot before the bucket went dark on Monday morning. The billing name on the account was Halcyon Group Advisory, and under it was a single authorized officer, E. Kane. Daniel Carter looked at those 2 characters and a last name for about 4 seconds, and then he sat down on the tailgate very suddenly, the way a man does when his legs make a decision without him. "Daniel." He didn't answer. "Daniel." "Ellis Kane," he said. "You know him?" "Yeah." "How?" Daniel put his hands on his knees and looked at the gravel. "There was a valley," he said, "in 2017. I'm not going to tell you where, and I'm not going to tell you why. There was a program that used contractors to run source networks because the contractors could go places we couldn't and pay people we weren't allowed to pay. And the contractor who ran the network that fed us the picture on that valley was named Ellis Kane." Olivia didn't say a word. The picture was wrong, not a little wrong. Wrong in the way where somebody knew it was wrong and sent it anyway, because the contract was up for renewal in 6 weeks, and a network that isn't producing doesn't get renewed. Daniel's voice had gone completely flat. So he produced. "How many?" Olivia said. 11. The wind moved through the trees behind the house, and neither of them said anything. "There was an inquiry," Daniel said. "I wrote a statement, 41 pages. I named him in it 11 times, one for each. And the inquiry found that there were, and I want to get this right, because I've remembered it every day for 9 years, insufficient grounds to attribute causal responsibility to a single reporting element." He walked. "He got a settlement and a non-disclosure in a new company, and I got a discharge and a coffee can in a closet." Daniel finally looked up. "And now his card is on the account that's holding your father's life's work." Olivia's hands had gone up to her mouth. "Daniel," she said. "Daniel, they had a car outside your house at 11 o'clock, before anything." "I know." "They weren't watching you because you helped me." "No. They were watching you because you're you." "Yeah," Daniel said. "I think I've been the second thing on his list for about 8 months." At 6:05, Emma came out to say Roy was making chili, and did the lady want to stay? And Olivia Bennett, chief executive officer of a company with 1,100 employees, said yes, and then sat at a stranger's kitchen table in Snohomish and ate chili out of a mismatched bowl while a 9-year-old explained the chicken situation to her in considerable detail. At 7:12 in the evening, Daniel's phone rang from a number with no area code. He stepped outside and answered it and said nothing. "Chief." Daniel closed his eyes. 9 years, Ellis Kane said. His voice hadn't changed at all. Warm, easy. The voice of a man who has never once had a bad night's sleep. "You look older. You've seen me. I've had 400 hours of you pushing a cart. Do you know what that does to a man watching that I sat there thinking, that's Danny Carter. That's the guy who wrote 41 pages about me. And he's emptying a shredder bin on 33. What do you want?" "I want you to hear something." A pause, and Daniel could hear ice in a glass. "I didn't come to Everhart because of you. That's the funny part. That's the part that keeps me up, and I don't stay up. I came for a diagnostic engine that's going to be worth $400 million to the right buyer, and 8 months in my facility's audit flags a night custodian with a background that doesn't sit right, and I open the file, and there you are. Then leave. I'm almost done. 2 days. Then why is my daughter at a stranger's house tonight?" The pause was longer this time, and when Kane spoke again, the warmth was gone out of it, like a light switched off. "Because you came into that office last night," Kane said. "I had that thing wrapped. She signs at midnight, she resigns Thursday with a package and a statement everybody keeps their teeth, nobody gets hurt, $4,000 a man and a piece of paper, and then a janitor breaks Bo Whitaker's arm with a mop cart. Don't call her that thing. You put me 2 days behind, and you put 3 of my people in a booking cell," Kane said. "So here's where we are, Chief. The second restraint in that bag was yours. It was always yours. You were going to sit in a chair for 4 hours and watch a woman sign a page, and then you were going to go home, and never open your mouth again, because that's the arrangement, and men with daughters always take the arrangement." Daniel's jaw worked once. "You don't have to say anything," Kane said. "You go dark, that's all. Take the kid, take the old lady, stay out of King County until Friday, and on Friday I'm gone, and you'll never hear this voice again. And I will put $150,000 in an account with your daughter's name on it and call it a 9-year apology. And if I don't, then you're not a janitor anymore. You're a variable." Kane sighed, and it was a genuinely tired sound. "Danny, I've read your file. I know exactly what you can do in a room. But you're one man with a 9-year-old, and I've got a budget, and there is no version of Thursday where you win because you can't be in the boardroom and at the farmhouse at the same time." The line went dead. Daniel stood in a driveway in Snohomish and looked at a lit kitchen window with his daughter's silhouette in it. At 7:40 he went back inside and told Olivia everything Kane had said word for word in the order he'd said it, because that was how he'd been trained to report a conversation, and because saying it out loud was the only way he could stop it from eating him. She listened without interrupting once. Then she said, "He told you the board meeting is Thursday. He told me he's gone Friday." "Right." Olivia had gone very still. "Daniel, he thinks he has until Thursday." What happens if it's tomorrow? At 8:15, Olivia Bennett called Karen Ashby. Karen, how fast can you call a special session of the board? You can't. How fast? Olivia, listen to me. You can't. The bylaws require 72 hours notice for a special meeting unless it's called by the chair or by a quorum, and Richard has 4 of them in his pocket. He's had 4 of them since March. Then how many do I have? Silence. How many, Karen? 3, Ashby said. Maybe. Whitfield, Nakamura, and Doheny. And Doheny is 81, and he loved your father, and he will do whatever the room does. And the 9th? The 9th is the chair, Gerald Voss. A breath. And he hasn't returned my call since Monday. At 8:50, Olivia sat on Roy Delacroix's back steps with her phone in both hands and said mostly to herself, "So I go into that room tomorrow with 3 votes in a folder." "You go into that room with more than that," Daniel said. "Do I? You've got a cloud account with his name on it. You've got a lawyer with a photograph of her kid. You've got 3 men in custody and a leased car outside my house and a detective who wants a warrant." He crouched down in front of her. "Miss Bennett, look at me. You're not going in there to prove you're good enough. Remember, don't have that conversation." "Then what conversation am I having? $11 million, a Nevada mailbox, and a man named Ellis Kane." Daniel stood back up. "And you're going to have it fast, because the second Vaughn knows what you have, he stops being patient. Patient is expensive." At 9:30, Marcus Webb finished his shift walkthrough on the ground floor of Everhart Solutions, checked the lobby doors, and told the nightman he'd see him tomorrow. At 9:52, he did not answer his phone when Daniel called. At 10:04, he did not answer again. At 10:20, a woman who parked on level 3 of the garage on 6th found a man in a security uniform lying between 2 support columns and called 911 and told the dispatcher twice that she thought he was dead. At 11:35 at night, Daniel Carter walked into an emergency department in downtown Seattle and found Detective Ruiz standing in the hallway with her badge on her belt and a coffee she wasn't drinking. "He's alive." Daniel didn't say anything. Fractured orbital broken collarbone, and they're watching his head. Ruiz's voice was very carefully level. "He got hit from behind and then he got hit on the ground. Somebody wanted a message, not a body." Cameras. Garage cameras on level 3 went to a test pattern at 9:51 and came back at 10:06. She let that sit. 15 minutes. Same trick as the 8 degrees on your freight elevator camera, except this time they didn't bother being subtle, because after tomorrow morning, they don't need to be. Was he conscious when they found him? In and out. Did he say anything? Ruiz hesitated, and Daniel saw her make a decision about him right there in a hospital hallway at 11:35 at night. "He said, 'Tell Daniel it wasn't 3 guys,'" she said. He said it twice. Daniel felt the floor go a little further away. It was more than 3. That's what a man with a fractured orbital bone said to a paramedic. "Yeah." At 11:50 they let him in for 4 minutes. Marcus Webb's face was the color of a bad bruise on one whole side, and his left eye was swollen shut, and when he heard Daniel's boots, he lifted one hand about 3 inches off the blanket. "Hey, don't talk. Man, I've been laying here for an hour with nobody to talk at." His voice came out thick and wrong. "Daniel, I'm here. There were 5 of them. Okay, 4 came at me. 1 stood at the ramp and watched like a foreman." Marcus swallowed, and it clearly hurt. 50s, gray hair short, nice jacket. He never came close. And when they were done, he crouched down by my head, and he said, "Tell your friend the offer expires at 7. Daniel's hands hanging at his sides opened and closed once. 7, Marcus said. "What's at 7? The board meeting was at 9. "Then it ain't at 9 no more." At 12:15 in the morning, Daniel Carter called Olivia and said 4 words. They moved it to 7. "That's not possible." The notice went out for Olivia. He heard her stop. He heard her breathe. "Check your email," he said. 20 seconds. Then very quietly, 12:01 a.m., revised notice. Meeting moved to 7 a.m. at the request of the chairman due to a scheduling conflict. Gerald Voss. Gerald Voss. she said, and there was something in the way she said it that made Daniel go still. What? Voss. Olivia's voice cracked in half. Daniel, Gerald Voss came to my father's funeral. He gave the eulogy. He stood up in front of 400 people and he said Thomas Bennett was the most decent man he ever met in business. And then he cried. He actually cried. And I held his arm walking out of the church. Olivia. He held my arm. I know. He's the 9th vote, she said. He's the chairman. He doesn't need Richard. Richard needs him. And there it was, sitting in the middle of the table where it had been the whole time, and Daniel Carter felt the last piece drop into a slot he'd been staring at for 2 days. Vaughn's not running this, he said. No. Vaughn signed the visitor passes with his own name on his own badge, and then made sure he was on camera in a garage 2 blocks away at 12:31. Daniel started walking down the hospital hallway. That's not a man covering himself. That's a man being hung out. He's the story, Olivia said. He's the one they hand to the police on Friday, the executive who went too far. And the chairman calls an emergency board meeting to express his shock and appoints an interim, and the interim signs the licensing agreement that moves your father's diagnostic engine to a buyer that Halcyon already has lined up. And I'm the young woman who wasn't ready, Olivia said. And Richard's the villain, and nobody ever says the name Ellis Kane out loud. At 1:40 in the morning, Daniel drove back to Snohomish with the windows down to stay awake, and thought about a man who could not be in a boardroom and at a farmhouse at the same time. Kane was right about that. Kane was right about almost everything, and that was the problem, and Daniel had been thinking about it wrong for 2 days because he had been thinking like a man protecting a house. You cannot protect a house. Houses have too many sides. You can only make the other man defend his. At 2:30, he woke Roy Delacroix up. Roy, I'm up. You were up. Son, I've got a 9-year-old, a woman with a skillet, and a CEO asleep on my couch. I ain't slept since Tuesday. Roy sat up in his chair. Say what you need. How many people do you know from the wing? In this county, 40. In this state. How many are within 30 minutes of here? Roy scratched his jaw. 6, 7. Why? Because at some point between now and 7 a.m., somebody's going to check whether my daughter is in this house, Daniel said. And I need her not to be, and I need this house to look exactly like she is. Roy Delacroix, 26 years of flying tankers, 68 years old, looked at Daniel for a long moment. Then he grinned like a much younger man. Now that, he said, is the first fun thing anybody's asked me to do in 9 years. At 3:15, Emma Carter was awake, dressed, furious, and holding a rabbit. Why can't I stay here? Because I said. That's not a reason, Dad, that's a... Emma. Daniel crouched down. Yesterday a man tried to open your door. She went quiet. Mrs. Nowak stopped him with a chair. She shouldn't have had to. That's on me. He held her by both shoulders. There's a house 40 minutes from here with a man named Bill Ostrander in it, who flew with Roy for 11 years, and his wife makes waffles, and there will be a King County deputy in that driveway by 4, and you're going to be bored out of your mind. Are you going to get hurt? No. Dad? M. You always say no. Her chin was going. You said no when Mom. She stopped herself. Daniel Carter took the hit standing up because there was nothing else to do with it. You're right, he said. So here's what I'll say instead. I'm coming back, and I'm not going to be a janitor when I do. Emma wiped her face with her sleeve hard twice. You were always more than a janitor, she said. Everybody else was just too dumb to check. At 4:20, Detective Ruiz called from a car. Warrant came through. Wrong judge right night. She sounded like a woman who had not been to bed either. The card on the SSL certificate is a personal Amex. Ellis Ray Kane, date of birth, March 11th, 1971, address in Medina. You picking him up? On what? Buying a website. Ruiz made a noise. Carter, I have a name attached to a shell that touched a stolen file. That's a Friday. That's a grand jury in 6 weeks. What I do not have is anything that puts him in a garage on 6th or outside your kid's window. Then get to the board meeting. It's a private meeting in a private building and no crime has been reported at it. It's at 7. I know what time it is." A pause and her voice dropped. "Mr. Carter, do not do anything at 7 a.m. that I'm going to have to arrest you for at 7:05. Detective? Yeah. Where's Richard Vaughn right now?" Silence. "That's an interesting question," Ruiz said slowly. "Because his wife called the precinct at 1 in the morning. He didn't come home. At 6:12 in the morning, a Ford Explorer with a bad smell and a full tank pulled into the loading zone on the north side of Everhart Solutions, and Daniel Carter got out in a clean pair of gray coveralls that no longer belonged to him, and walked to the employee entrance with an expired badge in his hand. He knew it was expired. That was the point. A dead badge still makes a noise at the reader, and the noise makes a guard look at the badge instead of the man. He swiped it. The reader went red, and the man behind the desk, who was not Marcus Webb, who was 50-something with short gray hair and a very nice jacket and a coffee he wasn't drinking, looked up and smiled like they were old friends. "Morning, Chief," Ellis Kane said. Daniel didn't move his hand off the badge reader. "You're at a desk," he said. "I'm at a desk." Kane leaned back in Marcus Webb's chair like it had been built for him. "Turns out when a guard gets hurt in a garage, the staffing agency sends whoever's available. Amazing how fast a building will hand you a uniform if you've got the right paperwork. You know what the badge on my chest says? It says Dale. Dale. Dale's real. Dale's in Tacoma. Dale's got a bad back." Kane spread his hands. "Sit down, Chief. You've got 48 minutes, and I'd like to spend some of them talking because we never got to. You put a man in the hospital. I put a man in the hospital who was going to call you the second he saw a face he didn't like, and he did that anyway from a gurney, so honestly, he came out ahead." Kane's voice never rose. That was the thing about him. 9 years, and the man still talked like a hotel concierge. "How's Marcus, by the way?" Genuinely asking. "Orbital fracture." "He'll heal. Guys like that heal out of spite." "Where's Richard Vaughn?" And there it was. The first crack. Kane's face did almost nothing, but the almost was enough because Daniel had spent 11 years reading faces in bad light. "Richard's having a difficult morning. His wife called the police at 1 a.m. Richard's wife has called the police before." Kane checked his watch. "Danny, let's do the part where I explain why you're going to walk back out that door." "Go ahead." 6:22 a.m. Right now, 2 of my people are on a county road outside Snohomish looking at a farmhouse with the kitchen light on and a 9-year-old's bicycle on the porch. Daniel let his face stay exactly where it was. "They're not going in," Kane said. "They're not animals. They're going to sit there. And at 7:05, when a chairman finishes reading a resignation letter to 9 men, I'm going to send 4 words that mean go home and everybody goes home, and this whole thing ends up being a bad week that a man tells his daughter about when she's 25. He smiled. "Or you can go up those stairs and I stop sending words." At 6:24, Daniel Carter did something Ellis Kane had not planned for. He pulled out a chair, sat down across the desk, and set his phone face up between them. "Call them," he said. "What?" "You've been running me for 8 months, and you never once checked your own picture." Daniel pushed the phone an inch closer. "Call your people. Ask them what they see." Kane looked at the phone, then at Daniel. Then he took out his own phone, and he made the call, and he said, "Talk to me." And he listened for 11 seconds. Daniel watched him listen. "Say that again," Kane said, more listening. "How many vehicles?" Daniel leaned back. "Because at 4 o'clock this morning," he said, 6 men who used to fly refueling tankers out of Fairchild drove 6 different cars to 6 different houses, and every one of those houses has a kitchen light on and a bicycle on the porch. Roy Delacroix bought 4 bicycles at a Walmart at 4:15 in the morning. He paid cash. He said it was the best $200 he ever spent. Kane hung up his phone very slowly and set it down. "And there's a King County deputy in one of those driveways," Daniel said. "And I'm not going to tell you which one, and if your men move on any of the 6, They get to explain themselves to a sheriff at 6 in the morning in a county where nobody's in a hurry. Huh, Kane said. Yeah, that's good. That's actually good. He almost sounded pleased. You made me defend 6 houses. You said I couldn't be in 2 places. Neither can you. At 6:28, Kane stood up. Fine, he said. Then let's do it the short way. You're a terminated employee standing in a lobby with a dead badge, and I'm the man at the desk. So I'm going to ask you to leave, and when you don't, I call Seattle PD, and they arrive in 7 minutes, and they take a statement from a security guard and a report from a man who broke 3 people's bones on Tuesday. How does that go for you? About like this, Daniel said, and he pointed at the ceiling. Kane looked up out of pure reflex, which was the single most human thing he did that morning. There was a camera in the northwest corner of the lobby. It had been running since 6:09. 38 minutes, Daniel said. You sat in a chair with a stolen uniform and told a man you put another man in the hospital, and you said the word Snohomish, and you told me what happens at 7:05. Kane's jaw moved. That feed goes to a server room you cloned files out of, he said. I own that room. You do. Daniel stood up. But the fire panel doesn't run through it. Neither does the lobby loop. Marcus told me that 8 months ago, while complaining about the wiring for 40 minutes, and I listened because he was lonely, and I had a mop, and there was nowhere else to be. At 6:30, the lobby door behind Daniel opened, and Detective Ruiz walked in with 2 uniformed officers and a folder. Ellis Ray Kane. Kane didn't turn around. You know, he said to Daniel quietly, the file said you were good in a room. It didn't say you were patient. 9 years, Daniel said. Ask me about patient. At 6:34, Ruiz cuffed him for impersonation of a security officer, and unlawful entry, which she admitted out loud in front of everyone, was a garbage charge that would hold for about 6 hours. 6 hours, she told Daniel in the corner of the lobby. That's what you bought. 2 of his people are in Snohomish, and I've got deputies rolling, and I've got a phone and an evidence bag that a judge is going to fight me over for a month. 6 hours is fine. Is it? The meeting's at 7. Ruiz put her hand flat on his chest, which surprised him. Mr. Carter, listen to me. You go up there and you swing at somebody. I lose the lobby video, I lose the phone, I lose all of it because a defense attorney stands up and says the whole thing came from a guy with a grudge and a history. Her eyes didn't move. Do you understand me? You already won the fight. Don't have another one. I'm not going up there to fight. Then why are you going up there? At 6:41, Daniel Carter walked into the 39th floor boardroom of Everhart Solutions, carrying a mop cart because he had discovered that people will let almost anything into a room if it squeaks. There were 4 men already at the table. Gerald Voss was at the head of it. 74 years old, silver, beautifully dressed, and he did not look up when the cart came in. We're set up, he said to no one. Whoever you are, come back at 10. Yes, sir. There's water on the credenza already. Yes, sir. And Daniel parked the cart against the wall and stood next to it with his hands folded and did not leave. At 6:47, Karen Ashby came in and sat down and put a legal pad in front of her and did not open it. At 6:52, 3 more directors arrived, and one of them, a woman named Nakamura, looked at the janitor standing by the wall for a second longer than anyone else had. At 6:55, Olivia Bennett walked in. She had not slept. She was wearing the same suit as the day before, because she had not been home, and she had a folder in her hand and a laptop under her arm, and she stopped inside the door and looked around that table at 9 men and 1 woman who had all decided how this morning was going to go before they parked their cars. Good morning, she said. Olivia. Voss stood up, which none of the others did. Sit down, sweetheart. It's been a hell of a week. It has. You've been through something no one should go through, and I want you to know that every person at this table is grateful you're safe. He said it beautifully. He said it the way he'd said it in a church, which is why this isn't going to be adversarial. Isn't it? No. Voss sat back down. It's going to be short. At 6:58, Gerald Voss called the special session to order and read a prepared statement about a security failure of an unprecedented nature and a leadership structure that had proven insufficient to the moment and the fiduciary duty of a board to act with clarity. Then he slid a piece of paper down the table. "That's a resignation," Olivia said. "That's a transition. You keep your seat on the board. You keep the family stock. The company keeps your father's name on the building, which is what he cared about." Voss folded his hands. "And we appoint an interim chief executive this morning who has 19 years here, and we get through the quarter." Richard Vaughn. "Richard is not here," Voss said smoothly, which I'd have said was unlike him, but yes. And that was when Daniel Carter, standing by the wall next to a mop cart, said his first word in that room. "He's not coming." Every head turned. "Excuse me," Voss said. "Richard Vaughn didn't go home last night." Daniel didn't move off the wall. "His wife called the precinct at 1 a.m. He's been missing about 30 hours, and the man who knows where he is got arrested downstairs 18 minutes ago." The room made a sound. Not words. Just the sound 11 people make when their morning changes. "Who is this?" one of the directors said. "That's the custodian," Voss said. "That's the man who stopped 3 armed contractors from putting my hand on a document at 2 in the morning, Olivia said. "And you terminated him at 7:41 yesterday." "HR terminated him for cause." "I signed nothing." Olivia turned to Karen Ashby. Karen Ashby, General Counsel of Everhart Solutions. 6 years, who went to Olivia's aunt's Christmas thing, opened her mouth, and nothing came out. At 7:01, Olivia said very gently, "Karen, tell them about Ethan." Ashby put her hand over her mouth. "Karen," Voss said, and there was a warning in it, a real one, and everyone in the room heard it. "Somebody sent me a photograph of my son," Ashby said. At 7:02, the boardroom of Everhart Solutions stopped being a place where a resignation was going to be signed. "On Monday afternoon," Ashby said, and her voice got stronger with every word the way voices do once the first one is out. "At 4:20, 12 hours before anybody went up to the 38th floor, and on Tuesday morning at 6:50 a.m., I received a document already drafted, and I was told to put my name on it, and I did." She looked down the table. "I want that in the minutes. I put my name on it, and I knew what it was." "Who told you?" Nakamura said. "The instruction came from the chairman's office." Gerald Voss laughed. It was a short, warm, deeply confident laugh, and it was the best thing he did all morning. "Karen, you've had a terrible week, and you've clearly been threatened by someone, and I'm going to make sure that whoever did that is found. But my office has 4 people in it, and any one of them—" "It came from your assistant's calendar invitation," Ashby said. "It came with a Word document attached, and the metadata on that document says it was created at 11:22 p.m. on Monday night." Silence. 11:22, Olivia repeated. "Karen, say the rest of it." "The document terminating Daniel Carter for unauthorized access to the 37th floor security closet," Ashby said, "was written 32 minutes before Daniel Carter accessed the 37th floor security closet." The room went so quiet that Daniel could hear the ventilation. "That's impossible," a director said. "It's a file property. It's 4 clicks." Ashby's hands were shaking, but her voice was not. "Somebody wrote the reason before there was a reason. Somebody knew there was going to be an incident in this building on Monday night, and they wrote the paperwork for the aftermath before it happened, and the only thing they got wrong was which door he'd open." At 7:05, Gerald Voss stood up. "This meeting is adjourned." "Sit down, Gerald," said the man at the far end of the table. 81 years old, hearing aids. He had not said a word since he arrived. Bill, Voss said. "Sit down." Frank Doheny put both hands on the table. "I buried Tom Bennett 4 years ago. You gave the eulogy. And I have sat in this room for 19 years and let younger men tell me what the quarter needed. And I'm going to sit here another 20 minutes and hear the rest of this. And if you leave this room, Gerald, I will personally call every person on this table tonight and tell them you left. Voss sat down. At 7:07, Olivia opened the laptop. The Meridian repository was cloned on Sunday the 12th at 11:41 p.m., she said. That was the third clone. There were partials in February and April. 5 months. The destination was a cloud bucket billed to an account under Halcyon Group Advisory Authorized Officer E. Kane, Ellis Ray Kane, who was arrested in our lobby at 6:34 this morning, wearing a security uniform belonging to a man named Dale. Halcyon, Nakamura said slowly. Halcyon did our facilities risk audit. Halcyon did our facilities risk audit. Olivia agreed. In November, who brought them in? Nobody answered. It's in the minutes, gentlemen. November 19th, Chairman's recommendation. At 7:09, Gerald Voss did the thing that Daniel had been waiting to see for 2 days, and it was small, and it was everything. He looked at his phone, not at the table, not at Olivia. He looked at his phone and he turned it face down, and Daniel watched a 74-year-old man realize that the person who was supposed to be handling this had not sent a message in 50 minutes. Gerald, Doheny said, look up. Voss looked up. Did you know? Doheny said. Frank? It's a yes or a no. There is no version of this, Voss said, and his voice had changed, and it was the first honest sound he'd made in that room, where any of you understand what I was actually dealing with. At 7:11, Detective Ruiz opened the boardroom door. She didn't come in. She stood in the doorway and she said, Miss Bennett, I'm sorry to interrupt. We found Richard Vaughn. Olivia stood up so fast her chair hit the wall. Is he alive? He's alive. He's in the back of a Chevy Tahoe in the parking garage on 6th level 2, with his hands taped and his phone gone, and he's been there since Tuesday night. Ruiz's eyes went around the table and stopped on Voss and stayed there. He's dehydrated, and he's got a broken nose, and he is extremely willing to talk. He's asked for a lawyer twice, and then withdrawn it twice, which in my experience is a man who has decided something. He was in the same garage, Daniel said, 2 levels above the one where they beat Marcus Webb. Yeah. Ruiz's mouth was a flat line. He was 30 feet away, and he heard the whole thing, and he couldn't do anything about it. At 7:14, the chairman of the board of Everhart Solutions said, I want my attorney. And no one in the room objected. And Frank Doheny said, that's a yes then. And Gerald Voss did not answer him. At 7:20, Olivia Bennett called for a vote, not on her resignation. I move that this board suspend the chairman pending an independent investigation, she said, and that we retain outside counsel this morning, and that we notify the buyer on the Meridian licensing term sheet, whoever they are, that any agreement executed by an interim officer of this company between now and the completion of that investigation is void. Second, said Doheny. It went 7-1 with Voss abstaining, and one director voting no, and then 20 minutes later in the hallway changing his mind out loud to a woman from legal who was not listening. At 7:29 the meeting adjourned and 11 people filed out of a room, and Olivia Bennett sat down in a chair and put her face in her hands for exactly 6 seconds. Then she stood up and walked over to the man by the mop cart. You didn't say anything. I said one thing. You said he's not coming. Olivia's eyes were red. That's all you said in an hour and a half. That's all that needed saying. Daniel shrugged. The rest of it you had in a folder. You just needed the room to stop being about you for 11 seconds so somebody would look at it. Daniel. Ma'am. I'm going to keep asking you to stop calling me that. I know. At 7:41, Ruiz got a call in the hallway and her whole posture changed. Say that again. Daniel was watching her when it happened, and he knew before she hung up. Snohomish County, she said. One of the 6 houses. Deputies in the driveway. Everything's fine. Nobody moved on it. Then what? They lost the second vehicle. Ruiz was already walking. 2 of Kane's people out there. Deputies have one on a traffic stop. The other one turned around at 5:50 this morning and drove south, and they picked him up on a plate reader at 6:22 heading into King County. 6:22, Daniel said. And something cold went straight down the middle of him, because at 6:22 he had been sitting across a desk in a lobby telling Ellis Kane he had made him defend 6 houses. Kane had been on the phone at 6:24. Kane had asked how many vehicles. Kane had already sent one back. "Where's Bill Ostrander's house?" Ruiz said. "That's not where she is." Ruiz stopped. "What?" At 7:44, Daniel Carter told a Seattle homicide detective something he had not told anyone, including Olivia Bennett, including Roy Delacroix, including the woman with the skillet. "Emma's not in Snohomish County," he said. "She hasn't been since 4:30 this morning." "Where is she?" "Mrs. Nowak's sister lives in Federal Way." Daniel's voice was completely level and his hands were not. "The sister's name is Helena, different last name. No phone in her name, she's on her son's plan. Kane has been reading my personnel file for 8 months, and there is nothing in that file or in any file that connects me to a 74-year-old woman in Federal Way who I have met exactly twice." Ruiz let out a breath. "You put your daughter with a stranger." "I put my daughter with the sister of the woman who jammed a chair under her door." Daniel finally looked at her. "That's not a stranger. That's the only kind of family that means anything. And the 6 houses were never about hiding her. They were about making Kane spend people." At 7:52, Olivia said, "So he sent a man back to Seattle at 5:50 in the morning. For what?" Nobody answered for about 4 seconds. Then Ruiz said, "Marcus Webb's still at Harborview." At 8:04, Daniel Carter drove a Ford Explorer up 9th Avenue with a detective's unmarked car ahead of him, and both of them going through lights. And at 8:11, he came through a set of double doors on the 4th floor of a hospital and found a nurse standing outside, room 412, arguing with a man in a windbreaker who was holding a clipboard and a badge that said he was from a patient transport service. The man saw Daniel come around the corner. He was maybe 35, and he was good, and he did the smart thing, which was drop the clipboard and go for the stairwell. He got 11 feet. Daniel took him into the wall beside the fire door, with his forearm across the back of the man's shoulders and his other hand on the wrist that had gone toward a jacket pocket. And he did not break anything this time, because there were nurses, and because Ruiz was 9 steps behind him, and because a very tired part of him had decided in the elevator that he was done breaking people this week. "Don't," he said into the man's ear. The man didn't. At 8:14, Ruiz took a pistol out of that jacket pocket and a folded discharge form with Marcus Webb's name typed on it, and a set of car keys with a rental tag. At 8:16, Marcus Webb, one eye swollen shut, said from his bed, "Was that him?" "Yeah." "Did he come for me?" "He came with paperwork," Daniel said. "He was going to wheel you out the front door." Marcus lay there for a second. "Man," he said, "I'm a rent-a-cop with a bad knee. You're a witness who saw 5 men and heard a voice. I saw 4 and a foreman. Marcus?" Daniel sat down on the edge of the bed, which he had never done for anyone. "You're the only person who put Kane at the scene of a violent felony. You've been the whole case since 10 o'clock Tuesday night, and nobody told you." Marcus's good eye watered, and he wiped it and said something about the air conditioning. At 8:40, Detective Ruiz stood in a hospital corridor and made 3 phone calls and then came back and said the words that changed the shape of the entire week. "He gave us Voss." Daniel looked up. "The guy in the windbreaker, 12 minutes in a hallway and he rolled." Ruiz sounded almost offended. "He's got 2 priors and a family court order, and he is not built for this, and he said he was told the job was hospital transport. And when I said attempted murder, his ears rang. He gave us a phone number, he gave us a Tuesday meeting in a parking lot in Georgetown, and he gave us a name for the man who paid, and it wasn't Kane. Voss. He said the old guy who talks like a lawyer." At 9:15 in the morning, Richard Vaughn sat in an interview room at Seattle Police Headquarters with an IV bruise in his arm from 4 hours at Harborview and a nose taped to the side of his face, and he talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He talked about November and a chairman who asked him for coffee and said the company was drifting. He talked about a facilities risk audit that came with a consultant named Ellis, who asked very good questions about server rooms. He talked about the moment in April when he understood that the $11 million he'd been told to route through 4 vendors was not a restructuring, and about the fact that by then his signature was on 9 documents. He talked about Monday night and about being told to sign 3 visitor passes and then be seen on camera in a garage 2 blocks away, and about how he had known standing there under those lights exactly what he was being made into. And then he said the thing that Detective Ruiz would repeat to Daniel that afternoon, word for word in a hallway. "I went to Voss on Tuesday night," Vaughn said. "In the garage. I told him it had gone too far, that a janitor broke a man's arm, that the girl had lawyers now. I told him I was going to the police in the morning. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, 'Richard, I have known you for 19 years. Vaughn's voice came apart. "And then he walked to his car, and 4 men put me in a truck." At 11:50, Gerald Voss was arrested in the lobby of a law office on 4th Avenue, and he did not run, and he did not shout, and he asked the arresting officer politely whether he could keep his reading glasses. At 1:20 in the afternoon, Ellis Kane's 6 hours ran out and did not matter, because by then, Ruiz had a felony assault charge, a conspiracy charge, a witness with a windbreaker, a phone in an evidence bag, and 38 minutes of lobby video in which a man in a stolen uniform said the word Snohomish out loud to a former Navy SEAL who had put a camera on it first. At 2:30, Daniel Carter drove to Federal Way. He knocked on a door in a neighborhood of small houses and hedges, and a 74-year-old woman named Helena opened it 6 inches on a chain and looked at him and closed the door and unhooked the chain and opened it all the way. "She's been playing cards since 10, Helena said. "She's winning. I don't know how." Emma came around the corner with a fan of playing cards still in her hand and stopped dead in the hallway. "Hi, Em." She didn't move for a second. Then the cards were on the floor, and she hit him at full speed, and Daniel Carter went down on one knee in a stranger's hallway and held onto his kid with both arms and did not say anything at all for a while. "You said you were coming back," she said into his shoulder. "I did." "You said you wouldn't be a janitor." "Yeah, well." He pulled back and looked at her. "I got fired, so that part took care of itself." Emma laughed a wet, hiccuping, furious laugh and hit him in the arm. At 4:10 that afternoon, Olivia Bennett stood in the parking lot of a hospital and told him that the board had voted her a full mandate, that outside counsel had been retained, that the buyer on the Meridian term sheet had already sent a letter distancing themselves so fast it arrived before the press release, and that 1,100 people had gotten an email at noon that she had written herself and rewritten 9 times. "They're going to be okay," she said. "The company's going to be okay. Good." Daniel. She had the folder under her arm, still like she'd forgotten it was there. "I want you to come back. To clean the halls. To run security. All of it. Every building, every site, every contractor. Full authority, direct report to me, and the first thing you do is fire the entire vendor list and start over." Daniel looked at the sky for a second. "How much?" $240, plus equity. "That's more money than I've made in the last 9 years combined." "I know," Olivia said. "I looked." And Daniel Carter, standing in a hospital parking lot with a borrowed truck and a dead badge in his pocket, and a daughter 40 minutes south playing cards with a stranger who wasn't a stranger anymore, said, "No." "No," Daniel said again, because she was still standing there. "You can't say no." "I just did it twice." "Daniel." Olivia moved so she was in front of him instead of beside him. "Do you know what I had to do to get that through? I called an emergency comp committee at 11 in the morning on the worst day in the history of this company." "I appreciate it." "You appreciate it." "Yeah." "Then take it." "I can't." "Why?" And Daniel Carter looked at a woman who had been awake for 32 hours and had just saved her father's company with a folder and a shaking general counsel, and he told her the truth because she had earned it about 4 times over. "Because I know what I'm like when I have authority," he said. Olivia didn't say anything. "I'm good at it. That's the problem. Put me in charge of 11 buildings, and I'll be good at it, and then I'll be at the office at 9 at night reviewing contractor vetting because there's always one more thing to check, and I will tell myself the whole time that I'm doing it for my daughter." He shifted his weight. "That's the exact thing I did for 11 years. I was doing it for my wife. Then she died, and I found out I hadn't been home in 4 years. That's not the same. It's exactly the same. It's just got a badge instead of a rifle." At 4:20, Olivia Bennett did something she would think about for a long time afterward, which was that she stopped selling. "Okay," she said. "Okay. Okay." She pushed her hair back with one hand. "God. Fine. Then what do you want? Because I'm not walking away from this and pretending I don't owe you, so tell me what the shape of it is and I'll build it." Daniel looked at the sky for a second. "6 months," he said. "What? I'll come in for 6 months. I'll tear the whole vendor list down to studs and rebuild it. I'll write the standards and I'll do the hiring." He held up one finger. "And on day 1, I hire the person who's going to run it after me, and I train them, and in 6 months, I hand it to them, and I go." That's the worst business decision I've ever heard. It's the only offer on the table. "What are your hours?" 8 to 4. I leave at 4. Every day. I don't care if the building's on fire." Olivia laughed, and it came out cracked and exhausted and real. "Why 4? School lets out at 3:15, Daniel said. "It takes me 40 minutes to get there in traffic, and I've never once done it." At 4:31, they shook hands in a hospital parking lot, and Olivia said, "I have one condition of my own." And Daniel said, "Go ahead." And she said, "The person you hire and train. I want approval." "Fine. And if it's who I think it is, I want you to know I already checked his file this morning." Daniel almost smiled. "He's got a bad knee. He's got 22 years of Air Force and 6 years in that lobby. And he told a detective there were 5 men when everybody else said 3. Olivia said, "I'll buy him a chair that reclines." At 6:15 that evening, Daniel Carter sat at a kitchen table in Federal Way and ate cabbage rolls with 2 women in their 70s and a 9-year-old who had won 41 cents at cards, and nobody said the word Everhart once. At 7:40, Mrs. Novak said she wanted to go home. "You can stay as long as you want." "Daniel." The old woman set down her fork. "I have a cat. I'll have somebody get the cat. I have a cat and a house and a recliner and a program I watch on Thursdays, and a man came to my door and I put a chair under a handle, and now I would like to go and sit in my own chair." Her chin came up. "Is that allowed?" Daniel put his hand over hers on the table. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. I'm going to have a deputy sit outside for a week." "That's fine. He can have coffee." She picked her fork back up. "He cannot come inside. I don't know him." At 9:50 that night, Emma fell asleep in the truck on the way north, and Daniel drove with the radio off and thought about the fact that his phone had not rung in 6 hours. That was the part that bothered him. Because Ellis Kane had been arrested at 6:34 that morning, and Gerald Voss at 11:50, and Richard Vaughn had talked for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and the man in the windbreaker had rolled in 12 minutes. And in 9 years of thinking about Ellis Kane, Daniel had never once imagined it ending with the man sitting quietly in a cell. At 8:05 the next morning, Detective Ruiz called and said, "He wants to see you." Daniel was standing in his own kitchen, making toast for 2. "No." "That's what I said you'd say." "Then why are we talking about it?" "Because his attorney filed a request for a proffer this morning," Ruiz said. "And in the proffer he's offering federal material, not King County. Federal. And when the AUSA asked what kind, the attorney said, quote, matters relating to a 2017 contracting inquiry. Daniel stood very still with a butter knife in his hand. "Mr. Carter, I'm here. You want to tell me what that is?" "No." "You want to tell me anyway." 11 men died in a valley in 2017 because a contractor sent intelligence he knew was wrong, Daniel said. "I wrote 41 pages about it. The inquiry found insufficient grounds. That contractor is sitting in your building." The line was silent for 4 seconds. "Okay." Ruiz said quietly. Okay. Then here's the rest of it, and I'm going to say it once, and you're going to sit down. That phone we took out of his pocket in the lobby. It's not his working phone. His working phone's gone. He burned it in the 12 minutes before you showed up. The phone he had on him was old. 4 years old. No SIM, and it's got an encrypted container on it that our forensics guy has been staring at since yesterday afternoon. Insurance. That's what I think it is. Guys like that keep a rope in the attic. A pause. And now his lawyer's offering to hand us the key. At 8:40, Daniel Carter drove Emma to school for the first time in 3 days, and she made him park instead of using the drop-off lane. Why? Because Mrs. Okafor moved the poster thing to Friday and everybody's been talking about you and I want them to see your face. Dad, a police car was at my house. That doesn't mean you... Marcus Delgado's dad flies planes, Emma said, and he has never been on the news. I wasn't on the news. Everhart Solutions was on the news 4 times, and Priya's mom said the word janitor at dinner. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt while the car was still moving, which he had asked her not to do 401 times. I'm just saying, park. He parked. He walked her to the door, and 9-year-olds looked at him and a teacher looked at him, and Kayla, who had once eaten a glue stick, looked at him with her mouth slightly open, and Emma Carter walked into that building with her crooked ponytail and her chin up like a woman entering a ballroom. At 11:20 that morning, Daniel went to Harborview. Marcus Webb was sitting up. The swelling had gone down enough that both eyes worked, which somehow made him look worse instead of better, because now you could see how tired he was. There he is, Marcus said. The man of the hour. How's the head? Doctor says I got a hard one. My ex-wife's been saying it for 20 years, so. He gestured at the chair. Sit down. And don't do the thing where you stand by the door counting the exits. It makes the nurses nervous. Daniel sat down. So I got a phone call, Marcus said. Did you? From a CEO. Marcus's good humor slipped a little. Daniel, she offered me a job I'm not qualified for. You are. I'm a night guard with a bad knee. You're the man who told a paramedic there were 5 and not 3 while your face was broken, Daniel said. You're the reason there's a case. Ruiz told me. She said you were the whole thing for 18 hours, and nobody bothered to tell you. Marcus looked at the ceiling. 22 years I did that job in a uniform, he said. 22 years, and I retired as a master sergeant, and I came out here, and I put on a blazer, and sat at a desk in a building where a vice president walked past me every day for 6 years and never once said good evening. His jaw worked. You know what he said to me Sunday night? He asked about my knee. That's what got me. That's the only time anybody up there asked me anything, and it was because he needed the log to look normal. I know. Man, I ain't crying in front of you. You can if you want. I don't want. At 11:35, Marcus said, Am I going to be your boss, or are you going to be mine? Neither. For 6 months, I'm going to teach you everything I know, and then you're going to run it, and I'm going to go home. 6 months and you walk. Yes. To do what? To pick my kid up at school, Daniel said. Marcus Webb looked at him for a long, long moment. Okay, he said. That's a real answer. I've heard a lot of fake ones. At 2:15 that afternoon, Detective Ruiz called back and her voice was different. They opened it. The container. 14,000 files. She sounded like someone reading numbers off a page because saying anything else would be too much. Contracts, wire records, a lot of it is exactly what you'd think. But there's a folder, Mr. Carter. It's got a date on it. It's got 2017 in the name. Daniel closed his eyes. What's in it? I'm not allowed to tell you. And I'm going to tell you anyway in about a week, when somebody with a better badge than mine sits down across from you. A pause. But there's a draft, an unsent one, written 4 days after. To who? To his brother. Daniel opened his eyes. It says he made a call, Ruiz said. That's the phrase. I made a call and I've been sick about it since. And then 2 pages of a man explaining to his brother why the renewal cycle made it necessary, and then a line at the end that says he's not going to send this. He kept it. For 9 years. On a dead phone in a drawer. Daniel sat down on the edge of his bed in a 2-bedroom apartment in Ballard, with the phone against his ear, and did not say anything for a while. Mr. Carter. Yeah. You still don't want to see him? No, Daniel said. I don't need to anymore. At 4:50, he opened the closet. He moved a bag of Christmas lights and a box of Emma's kindergarten drawings and a broken lamp he had been meaning to fix since 2021, and he took out a coffee can and he sat down on the floor of his bedroom with it. Inside, there was a bronze star and a folded page with 11 names on it in his own handwriting, and a photograph of a woman named Sarah laughing at something outside the frame. He looked at the 11 names for a long time. Then he took out his phone and found a number he had not called in 6 years. She picked up on the 5th ring. Hello? Denise. Silence. Danny Carter, she said. It was not a question, and it was not warm, and it was not cold. It was the voice of a woman who had a Tuesday afternoon, and now did not. Yeah. Is somebody dead? No, ma'am. Then what? Daniel found that his hand was shaking and that he could not entirely make it stop, and he decided to let it. They arrested him, he said. The silence on the other end went on so long that he checked the screen to see if the call had dropped. Say his name, Denise Ramirez said. Ellis Kane. Say it again. Ellis Ray Kane. He was arrested yesterday morning in a lobby in downtown Seattle in a stolen uniform. Daniel's voice was doing something he had no control over. And they took a phone off him, and there's a folder on it with 2017 in the name, and there's a letter he wrote to his brother 4 days after and never sent. What does it say? It says he made a call. Denise Ramirez started crying, not loudly. He could barely hear it. He sat on the floor of his bedroom and listened to a woman cry 3 states away, and did not say a single word, because he had learned 9 years ago that there is nothing to say, and the worst thing you can do is decide there is. You stood in my living room, she said finally. I did. You had that flag, and you had that face, and I asked you if it was worth it, and you didn't answer me. I remember. Danny, I've thought about that for 9 years. Do you know why? Her voice broke and came back. Because you were the only one who didn't lie to me. Every single person who came to my door had an answer. Every one. And you just stood there and let it be terrible. Daniel put his hand over his eyes. I need you to do something for me, she said. Anything. There's 10 other women. I know. Some of them moved. Ronnie's mother's in a home in Tucson. Prescott's wife remarried, and I don't blame her. Denise pulled in a breath. You call every one of them, not a lawyer, not an officer, not a letter from a government. You. Okay. You hear me? You. Yes, ma'am. At 9:40 that night, Daniel Carter finished the 11th call. It took 5 hours. 2 numbers were dead, and he found the families anyway, one through a church, and one through a woman's sister on a social media account he made and then deleted. One man's father hung up on him twice before calling back at 9 o'clock and saying in a voice like gravel, Say it slow, son. I want to get it right. Emma found him at the kitchen table at 10 with the phone face down in front of him. Dad? Hey, Em. You were on the phone all night. I was. To who? Daniel looked at his daughter and thought about how much of his life he had spent deciding that she was too young for the true version of things, and how the true version had ended up walking through their front door anyway, and trying her bedroom handle at 3 in the morning. Come here, he said. She sat down. You know how I told you I drove to houses 11 times and told people their person was gone? Yeah. Tonight I called all 11 of those houses and told them the man who caused it got arrested. Emma's face did something complicated. Were they happy? No. Then why'd you call? Because for 9 years the government told them it was nobody's fault, Daniel said. And when a thing is nobody's fault, you can't put it down. You just carry it around forever wondering if it's yours. He turned the phone over and over on the table. Tonight, 11 families found out whose it was. That's not happy. But it's better. Emma thought about that for a while with her chin on her arms. Dad? Yeah. Is that why you were a janitor? Part of it. Because you thought it was your fault. Daniel Carter did not answer for a moment because his daughter had just walked straight through the middle of a thing he had been going around the edges of for 9 years. Yeah, he said. I thought if I never made another decision, I couldn't get anybody else killed. That's dumb. Emma. It is. She sat up. You made a decision on Monday, and Miss Olivia is alive. At 10:15, Daniel Carter went and got a coffee can out of a closet and put a bronze star on the shelf above the television between a spelling bee ribbon and a ceramic frog that Emma had made in 2nd grade, and he did not say anything about it. And Emma did not either, and both of them looked at it about 9 times over the next 20 minutes. At 7:50 on Friday morning, he put on the only sport coat he owned. You look weird. Thank you. Not bad weird. Emma was holding a poster board against her chest with both arms, and she had been holding it since 6:40. Just like you don't look like you. That's the idea. Dad. She stopped at the door. I changed it. Changed what? The poster. She wouldn't look at him. I did the whole thing on Sunday, and then everything happened. And I did a new one at Roy's house with the markers he had, and they're bad markers. And I'm not showing you until I stand up. Em, you don't have to do the thing about, I know what I'm doing, she said. At 9:20, Daniel Carter sat in a chair meant for a person half his size in the back of a 4th grade classroom with 11 other parents, and watched a boy explain that his father flew regional jets to Boise, and a girl explained that her mother did something with laws, and a kid named Terrence explain at length that his mom was a dental hygienist, and that everyone in the room had plaque. Then Mrs. Okafor said, Emma Carter. And Emma walked up to the front and turned her poster around. There was no photograph of a building on it. There was no logo. There was a drawing in bad markers of a man pushing a cart down a hallway, and above it in careful block letters it said, My dad cleans the building at night. And underneath that in smaller letters it said, And he is the bravest person I know. My dad is a night custodian at a technology company in Seattle, Emma said. He works from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. He does 31 floors. He mops and he takes out the trash and he cleans the bathrooms and he gets home at 6:20 in the morning and he drives me to school before he sleeps. Somebody's father in the 2nd row shifted in his chair. A lot of people think that's not an important job, Emma said. My dad's boss walked past him for a year and never said his name. Somebody at this school said janitors are people who didn't finish school. Kayla 4 seats from the front went the color of a stop sign. But on Monday night, Emma said, 3 men came into an office and grabbed the boss of the whole company, and the only person in the building who did anything about it was the janitor. The room went completely silent. He was a Navy SEAL for 11 years, she said. He stopped being one because a lot of people he knew died and it broke his heart, so he took a job where nobody would look at him, and it worked because nobody did. Mrs. Okafor had her hand over her mouth. My mom died when I was 5, Emma said. So it's just us, and my dad gets 4 hours of sleep, and he never says anything about it, and he makes me breakfast even when he's basically asleep standing up, and one time he said, I never have to save bread from him, and he made me say it back. Daniel Carter in a chair meant for a person half his size put his hand over his eyes. So my report is that my dad has 2 jobs, Emma said. One is he cleans a building, the other one is he's my dad, and he's really, really good at both of them, and only one of them pays money, and that's not fair, but he doesn't complain about it, so I'm not going to either. She lowered the poster. That's it. That's my report. Nobody clapped for about 2 seconds. Then a woman in the front row started, and then the whole room did, and Terrence yelled something about plaque that nobody understood, and Mrs. Okafor said, Emma, that was, and then didn't finish it, and a 9-year-old girl walked back to her desk past a boy whose father flew regional jets and sat down and looked at the back of the room. At 10:05 in the hallway outside a fourth-grade classroom, Daniel Carter crouched down in front of his daughter and could not say anything for about 8 seconds. "You cried," Emma said. "I did not." "Dad, I watched you." "I had something in my eye for 4 minutes." "Sure." He pulled her in and held on to the back of her head. "What?" "That's the best thing anybody's ever said about me," he said. "And I've had people say things about me in rooms with generals in them." At 1 o'clock that afternoon, the story broke. Not the way stories usually break. There was no press conference. A reporter at a Seattle paper had been working the arrest of a board chairman for 2 days, and finally got somebody at the county to confirm the shape of it. And at 1 o'clock, the headline said that the chairman of Everhart Solutions had been charged in connection with a conspiracy to steal a medical AI platform, and that a night custodian had interrupted the operation with a cleaning cart. By 3, it was national. By 5, 4 networks had called Everhart's communications office, and a producer had somehow gotten Daniel's cell number, and he answered on the second ring and said, "How'd you get this?" And the producer said, "Mr. Carter, we'd love to have you on tomorrow morning." And Daniel said, "No thank you," and hung up, and then blocked the number, and then blocked the next 4. At 6:30, Olivia called. "They want you on television." "I know." "You should do it." "No." "Daniel, this is the best press this company has ever gotten, and it's all true, which never happens." Olivia. "I know." She sighed. "I know. I had to try. Communications made me try. I wanted on the record that I said the words with no enthusiasm at all." "Noted. Can I tell you something?" Her voice changed. "The board approved everything this morning. Every single thing. Full remediation, outside audit, new security structure, all of it." And then Frank Doheny stood up at the end and said, "Now can somebody explain to me why we've never had a decent break room for the night staff?" And 8 men who have never thought about a break room in their lives voted unanimously to build one. Daniel laughed out loud, which surprised both of them. At 8:15 that night, Emma asked if they were rich now. "No." "But you got a job." "I got a job for 6 months." "Then what?" "Then Marcus runs it, and I find something else." "What if there isn't something else?" Daniel put down the dish he was drying. "Emma." "I'm just asking. Come here." He waited until she was looking at him. 4 years ago, I had nothing, and I got us this far pushing a cart. There is always something else. That's not a promise about money. That's a promise about me." Over the next 14 months, this is what happened, and none of it happened fast, because nothing real does. Gerald Voss was indicted on 9 counts and hired the best defense in the state and went to trial in the spring. And Richard Vaughn sat in a witness box for 3 days and destroyed him in a voice so flat that a juror later said it was worse than shouting would have been. Voss got 11 years. He was 75. He asked at sentencing whether he could keep his reading glasses, and a marshal said yes. Vaughn pleaded to 2 counts and cooperated on everything and served 28 months. And on the day he reported, he sent one email to Olivia Bennett, and it said, "Your father hired me when I was selling copiers. I have thought about that every day for a year. I am sorry. Do not answer this." She didn't. Ellis Ray Kane never went to trial in King County because 8 weeks after his arrest, 2 federal agents drove to Seattle and sat down in a room with him for 6 hours, and everything after that happened in a different building with a different seal on the door. Daniel testified for 2 days. He was not asked about a mop cart. He was asked about a valley and a reporting element, and 41 pages, and a woman named Denise Ramirez sat 4 rows behind him in a courtroom in Virginia with 10 other people who had all driven or flown to be there. And when Daniel finished and stepped down, a man from Tucson, who was 83 years old, stood up. He wasn't allowed to. A marshal moved toward him. He stood up anyway, and he did not say anything at all, and one by one, so did the other 10. Ellis Kane looked at his hands and did not look up again for the rest of the day. At the end of it, the finding that had said insufficient grounds to attribute causal responsibility to a single reporting element was formally withdrawn, and 11 families received a letter, and the letter used the word deliberate. Denise Ramirez called Daniel the night she got hers. "I read it 11 times, she said. "Yeah." "Danny, I need to ask you the thing again." He knew exactly which thing. "Go ahead." "Was it worth it?" And this time, 9 years later, standing in his kitchen in Ballard with his daughter's math homework spread across the table, Daniel Carter had an answer. "No," he said. "It was never worth it, and it never will be, and anybody who tells you different is selling something. But it's known now. And that's the only thing anybody was ever going to be able to give you, and it took 9 years, and I'm sorry, it took 9 years." Denise Ramirez was quiet. "That's the right answer," she said. Marcus Webb took over the security program at Everhart Solutions on a Monday in October in a chair that reclined with a knee that still hurt when it rained, and the first thing he did was walk the night shift and learn every single name. There were 41 of them. He learned all 41 in 9 days. Daniel Carter's last day was a Friday. There was a cake, which he had specifically asked them not to do, and a card signed by 200 people, and Olivia Bennett stood up in a break room that had not existed a year earlier and said 11 words before her voice quit on her, and everybody pretended not to notice while she got it back. "He was here for a year before any of us said his name," she said. "That was it. That was the whole speech. He was in his truck at 4 o'clock. He picked up Emma at 4:12, and she got in and said, 'You're early.' And he said, 'I'm exactly on time.' And she said, 'Dad, you've been on time every day for 6 months. It's honestly kind of a lot.' And he said, 'Get used to it.' He took the 6 months of salary, and he did not buy a house, and he did not buy a car. He put most of it away in an account with Emma's name on it, and with the rest, he did the one thing he had been thinking about since a hospital hallway in July. He started a company with 4 employees. Not a security firm. There were 900 security firms. What he built was smaller and stranger, and did one thing: it went into buildings and looked at them the way a man with a mop looks at them from the bottom at 2 in the morning. And then it told the people at the top exactly which 8 degrees somebody had turned a camera. He hired veterans. He hired 2 people who had been custodians. He hired a woman who had spent 11 years in hotel housekeeping and who found things in her first week that made a security director from Houston put his head in his hands. He was home by 5 every day, and on a Tuesday afternoon, in a spring that felt like it belonged to somebody else, a 5th grader named Emma Carter came out of a school building and found her father leaning against a truck with his arms crossed, waiting the way he had waited every single day for a year and a half, and she rolled her eyes at him, the way kids do when they are so sure of something that they can afford to. That was the whole thing. That was what it had all been for. Daniel Carter had spent 11 years being invisible on purpose, and 4 more being invisible out of grief. And one night he had put his hand on a door and stopped pretending, and it had cost him a job, a hiding place, and every wall he had built between his daughter and the truth. He would have paid all of it again before breakfast, because a man is not what he used to be, and he is not the medal in the coffee can, and he is not the name on the badge that somebody else can take away in an hour. A man is what he walks toward when he hears somebody say, "Don't." Daniel Carter heard it. He walked toward it, and he never hid again.